Chapter 520. After hearing Yin Dao's words, Shui Lingzi sneered and asked, "Since you don't think that the godly knife sect's patriarch would do such a thing, then why do you think that the Tiangongmen's patriarch would give you such a precious item?" Yin Dao froze for a moment as he pondered in his heart. A trace of hesitation appeared in his eyes. Seeing this, Water Spirit was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "A level 25 equipment is definitely suitable for the Godly Sword sect master's weapon. It can even be compared to the Godly Sword sect master's weapon. Such a precious item, Yin Dao, think about it carefully." Speaking up to here, Water Spirit paused for a moment before continuing, "Yin Dao, it's better to be realistic. Don't think about those useless things. If your request is a bit lower, then maybe I'll agree to it. But if your request is too high, then I can't help you even if I want to." At this moment, Yin Dao's heart was in a mess. On one hand, there was Shui Lingzi's persuasion. On the other hand, there was the benefits of a level 25 equipment. This made his heart in a mess. No matter what, Shui Lingzi was right. It was impossible for the Godly Knife sect's patriarch to give his weapon to someone else. As for that level 25 equipment, it was indeed on the same level as the sect master of the Godly Sword sect. In fact, it might even surpass the sect master of the Godly Sword sect. Such a precious level 25 equipment, would the Tiangongmen really give it away? Thinking up to here, Yin Dao suddenly realized that he was thinking too much. Yin Dao was a bit regretful. A level 25 equipment that was better than the Godly Knife sect's patriarch's weapon. If he could obtain it and give it to the Godly Knife sect's patriarch, then he would definitely look at him in a different light. Thinking up to here, Yin Dao was annoyed. He clenched his teeth, but his injuries were too heavy. Even if he clenched his teeth, he still felt a sharp pain in his body. This pain stimulated Yin Dao's brain, causing him to become absent-minded. He suddenly had an idea. Would the Godly Knife sect's patriarch really not give away his weapon? As this thought appeared in his mind, Yin Dao's mind shook and he continued to think. Although the Godly Knife sect's patriarch's weapon was precious, it was only a weapon. Would he really not give it away? Could it be that there was no reason for the Godly Knife sect's sect leader to refuse? Impossible. As long as the reason was sufficient, Yin Dao felt that the Godly Knife sect's patriarch would definitely give his knife away. If the leader of the Godly Knife clan could give away his weapon, then why couldn't the Tiangongmen give away the same level of equipment as the leader of the Godly Knife clan? Thinking of this, the hesitation in Yin Dao's eyes disappeared and was replaced with determination. This was because he suddenly understood that the Godly Knife clan master's weapon could be given away. The Tiangongmen's level 25 equipment could also be given away. All they needed was a reason to give it away. The Tiangongmen were a big sect that made equipment, while the Godly Knife sect was a sect that was famous for its martial arts. Although both sects were powerful, their specialties were different. There was one thing that Yin Dao was sure of, and that was that the Tiangongmen were not as good as the Godly Knife sect in terms of martial arts. In other words, if the two sects were to fight, the Tiangongmen would definitely lose. Therefore, the Tiangongmen would definitely not dare to fight with the Godly Knife sect. Thinking of this, Yin Dao's eyes lit up, and his thoughts gradually became clear. Seeing that Yin Dao had been thinking for a long time without saying anything, Shui Lingzi couldn't help but ask, "Yin Dao, have you thought it through?" Hearing Shui Lingzi's question, Yin Dao finally reacted. He raised his head to look at Shui Lingzi and slowly nodded, "I've thought it through." Hearing this, Shui Lingzi was overjoyed. She had already explained the reasons so clearly. She didn't believe that Yin Dao still didn't understand the reason behind it. It wasn't that the Tiangongmen couldn't give away level 25 equipment to outsiders, but it depended on who it was. If it was a nobody like Yin Dao, then it would be impossible. However, if it was a famous big shot, then everything was possible. Thinking of this, Shui Lingzi smiled and nodded. "Yin Dao, it's good that you've thought it through. You should change your condition." As long as my ability permits, I will definitely satisfy you. Yin Dao shook his head. Shui Lingzi, I've thought it through. Other conditions are useless to me. Even if I get it, it won't change much. Only that level 25 equipment is what I want the most. Speaking up to this point, Silver Knife paused for a moment before continuing. If I had that piece of level 25 equipment, everything would have changed for me. My dream would have come true. Therefore, my condition won't change. It's still level 25 equipment. Shui Lingzi's mouth was wide open as she looked at Yin Dao in disbelief. After a while, she asked, haven't you thought it through? Yin Dao nodded. Yes, I've thought it through. Only that level 25 equipment is useful to me, so my condition won't change. Am I wrong? Shui Lingzi sighed. Your idea isn't wrong, but it's impossible. If you think it's impossible, how will it help you? Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao suddenly sneered. Impossible, Shui Lingzi, tell me, why is it impossible? Shui Lingzi looked at the confident Yin Dao and her hands couldn't help but tremble. The thought of turning Yin Dao into a pile of mud once again surged into her mind. She didn't understand where Yin Dao's confidence came from. A nobody from the Godly Sword sect also wanted a level 25 equipment from the Tiangongmen. If this matter was spread out, no one would believe it. However, this Yin Dao with a face full of confidence really did it. Not only did he do it, but he also did it with full confidence. Shui Lingzi clenched her teeth and took a deep breath before slowly saying, Yin Dao, I've already said that your idea can come true. You should think of a better way. Yin Dao shook his head and lightly said, No need, I think you'll meet my condition. Speaking up to here, Yin Dao paused for a moment before continuing, If you can't meet my condition, then I'll let the people from Kikiaman leave. Hearing Yin Dao's words, Shui Lingzi felt her heart suddenly beat faster and her breathing became a bit rushed. Shui Lingzi hurriedly circulated her Zhen Qi to calm this chaotic atmosphere. Then she looked at Yin Dao and suddenly said, Yin Dao, don't you want to make a name for yourself? You can take me as your master. Although I can't guarantee that you'll make a name for yourself, I'll at least give you a certain status in the Heaven's Craftsman faction in the future, just like me. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao's gaze suddenly froze. He deeply looked at Shui Lingzi, trying to decipher her words. Chapter 521. Yin Dao wanted to know whether what Shui Lingzi said was true or false. Yin Dao was risking his life to do this. Wasn't his purpose to stand out? Now, Shui Lingzi gave him this opportunity. Yin Dao also admitted that what Shui Lingzi said was true. Shui Lingzi might not be able to make him stand out, but he would definitely be able to have a certain status in the Tiangongmen. Seeing that Yin Dao was a bit tempted, Shui Lingzi sneered. As long as Yin Dao agreed, his conditions would naturally be invalid. As long as he completed today's task, Shui Lingzi didn't care about anything else. Even if he accepted Yin Dao as his disciple, it didn't matter. Shui Lingzi had already seen through Yin Dao's character. With his temper, it would be really difficult for him to stand out. Yin Dao's temper wasn't honest, but somewhat eccentric. His thoughts were also different from others. He was too stubborn. It was simply too difficult for such a person to stand out. Therefore, Shui Lingzi wasn't optimistic about Yin Dao's chances. What he did was just a temporary measure. At this moment, Shui Lingzi suddenly felt someone approaching from behind. She turned around and saw Li Mingshan coldly glaring at her with a face full of anger. Shui Lingzi, what are you doing? I already warned you. If you dare to do this again, do you really think I can't deal with you? Speaking up to here, Li Shan paused for a moment before continuing, I'll tell you the truth. My blade just now only used 50% of my strength. If you dare to do this again, then I'll have to ask you to take my full blow. After hearing Li Mingshan's words, Shui Lingzi was also shocked. She didn't expect that such a terrifying attack was only half of Li Mingshan's strength. If half of his battle power was already this powerful, then even if Li Shan went all out, he might not be able to withstand it. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi's face suddenly changed. He took a deep breath and slowly said, Li Mingshan, don't try to scare me. You only used half of your strength just now, and I can tell you that I also only used half of my strength. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Li Shan gritted his teeth and said, Shui Lingzi, do you really want to try? Shui Lingzi shook her head. I don't want to try, but since you insist, I can only try. Li Mingshan looked at Shui Lingzi and suddenly sneered. He slowly reached out his hand and grabbed the hilt of the saber behind him and said in a cold voice, Shui Lingzi, I can tell you the truth. If I use my full strength, even I won't be able to control it. I can only use this saber to finish it. At this point, Li Shan paused for a moment before continuing, Shui Lingzi, you don't regret it? As he spoke, Li Shan began to slowly pull out his saber. His strength began to burst forth. Seeing that the two of them were about to fight again, Shadowless and Wu Kadi hurriedly walked in front of them and tried to stop them. Li Mingshan looked at Shadowless in front of him and coldly said, You saw it just now, Shui Lingzi tried to steal our godly blade sect's disciple in front of me. He forced me to do this. Shadowless quickly waved his hand, That's just a small matter. At this point, Shadowless paused for a bit, then he moved closer to Li Shan and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, Li Shan, if Shui Lingzi wants to recruit your godly sword sect's disciples, then she must have promised them some benefits. You can also promise Yin Dao some benefits, then wouldn't this matter be settled? Such a simple matter, why do you have to fight, don't you think it's ridiculous? After hearing Shadowless's words, Li Shan's eyes suddenly lit up, but then he shook his head. No, I'm afraid I can't do what Shui Lingzi said. Shadowless suddenly sneered and glanced at Yin Dao, then said in a low voice, Li Shan, Yin Dao is such a disciple, do you still want to use him? Li Shan heard this and froze for a moment. Shadowless, what do you mean? They are all godly blade sect's disciples, so they should be treated equally. What's there to value? Hearing Li Shan's answer, Shadowless sneered, I only heard one sentence from you, and I know that you don't like Yin Dao. Hearing this, Li Shan's expression changed, then he coldly said, Shadowless, our sex matters don't need outsiders to interfere. Shadowless sneered and shook his head. Who cares about your godly blade sex matters? I just want to say, after this matter is over, will you still keep a disciple like Yin Dao? In other words, don't look at how he is jumping around now, but after a while, he won't be able to jump around anymore. If he isn't dead, then he will become a cripple. What use will he have in the future? Shadowless paused for a moment, then continued, For such a disciple, what do you have to worry about? Let me say, no matter what the conditions are, you should agree. After all, you won't be able to fulfill them in the future. Hearing Shadowless's words, Li Shan fiercely clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. Shadowless was too ruthless to be able to say such heartless words. Simply, however, Li Shan had to admit that although Shadowless's words were ruthless, they were correct. Yin Dao's injuries were too heavy. Even if they could be cured, his martial arts would definitely not recover, and he might even become a cripple. For such a disciple, what did he have to worry about? Thinking of this, Li Shan's mouth suddenly revealed a trace of a smile. He suddenly stepped forward and patted Shadowless's shoulder and said in a low voice, Shadowless, you are ruthless. I see that your fellow sect members are unlucky enough to meet you. Shadowless sneered. I don't know if my fellow sect members are unlucky or not, but for the Godly Blade sect to have a protector like you, the Godly Blade sect's disciples are really unlucky. Li Shan and Shadowless looked at each other and saw a trace of disdain in each other's eyes. Li Shan nodded and didn't say anything. He took a step back and opened up the distance between him and Shadowless, then raised his head to look at Shui Lingzi. At this moment, Shui Lingzi was also listening to Wu Kadi's advice. Shui Lingzi, you shouldn't fight with Li Shan. Li Shan's martial arts are good. If you fight and get injured, it won't be good for either of you. You should think about it carefully. Shui Lingzi shook her head. I don't want to fight with anyone, but Li Shan's actions just now are really infuriating. Does Li Shan think that he can control us Tiangongmen? Wu Kedi hurriedly waved his hand. Okay, Shui Lingzi, you don't need to say any more. This matter is over. Let's talk about it and try to find the best solution. What do you think? Shui Lingzi nodded. As long as Li Shan doesn't cause trouble for me, I naturally won't take the initiative to cause trouble for him. You can rest assured about this. Chapter 522. At this moment, Li Shan had already thought it through. Shadowless words made him understand the key point. Yin Dao was just an insignificant person. For such a person, even if he didn't keep his words, no one would know. More importantly, Yin Dao didn't have long to live. His injuries were so heavy that even if he recovered in the best condition, he wouldn't be able to make any progress in martial art. For such a person, there was nothing to worry about. Li Shan wasn't a good-tempered person. If it wasn't for the fact that Yin Dao still had some value, he would have smashed Yin Dao into a pile of mush because he had just contradicted him. Li Shan looked at Yin Dao and thought that if Yin Dao could really get the equipment, then keeping him would really be a burden. Once Silver Knife got his hands on the equipment, it wouldn't be easy to get it from him. Therefore, Li Shan had already thought of a good ending for Yin Dao, a good ending where he could kill two birds with one stone. Understanding this point, Li Mingshan's mood suddenly brightened. He waved his hand to Shui Lingzi and said with a smile, Shui Lingzi, I was just thinking too much. If you want to do something, go ahead and do it, I won't stop you. Speaking up to here, Li Shan paused for a moment before continuing, but I hope you can understand that the matter between us needs to be settled as soon as possible. After all, everyone is very busy, and we don't have much time to sit here. After hearing Li Shan's words, Shui Lingzi was stunned. She didn't understand the meaning of Li Shan's words. However, Shui Lingzi thought that since Li Shan didn't care, then it was a good thing for her. Thinking up to here, Shui Lingzi cupped her fist towards Li Shan and said, Thank you. After saying this, Shui Lingzi turned around and walked towards Yin Dao. Arriving in front of Yin Dao, Shui Lingzi smiled and said, Yin Dao, you also heard what your protector said just now. Now I'll tell you the truth. I want to accept you as my disciple. On one hand, it's because of today's matter. On the other hand, I see the shadow of my past in you. Therefore, I want to take you as my disciple and nurture you into a useful talent. What do you think? In fact, Yin Dao had been carefully listening to the conversation between Li Mingshan and Shui Lingzi. He had been thinking about the meaning of those words. If he left the Godly Saber sect and joined the Tiangongmen, he would become Shui Lingzi's disciple. The question was this a good choice? There was one thing that Yin Dao had to admit: as long as he became Water Spirit's disciple, he would definitely be much stronger than he was now. If Shui Lingzi were to guide him carefully in the future, perhaps he would really become someone like Shui Lingzi. Thinking that he would become an elder of the Tiangongmen or a consecrator in the future, Yin Dao's heart was moved. According to his current life, if nothing unexpected happened, he would be like this for the rest of his life. But if he became Water Spirit's disciple, his life would definitely change greatly. To become a respected elder. Thinking of this, Yin Dao wanted to immediately agree with Shui Lingzi. However, Yin Dao suddenly had an idea. What he had done just now had already caused Shui Lingzi's anger. Yin Dao could guarantee that Shui Lingzi was really angry just now, and not just angry but very angry. Then, under this kind of situation, was she being forced to accept him as her disciple? Although Shui Lingzi said that she saw a shadow of herself in him, Yin Dao didn't really believe it. If that was the case, once he became her disciple, would Shui Lingzi treat him well? Would she teach him carefully? If she wouldn't, then wouldn't all of this be in vain? Thinking of this, Yin Dao looked up at Shui Lingzi and asked with some doubt, Shui Lingzi, do you really want to accept me as your disciple? Shui Lingzi nodded. Could it be that accepting a disciple is fake? Hearing this, Yin Dao's heart was moved again. If he could become an elder of the Heavenly Palace sect, it would be a good choice for him. However, Yin Dao hesitated again. If he became Shui Lingzi's disciple, then he naturally wouldn't be able to get that level 25 equipment. Thinking of that level 25 equipment, Yin Dao's mind began to churn as he imagined his future life. As long as he had that level 25 equipment, Yin Dao was sure that he would be able to become a disciple of the Godly Sword Sect's sect leader. As long as he became the disciple of the Godly Sword Sect's sect leader, then he would have the chance to become the Godly Sword Sect's sect leader. Thinking of the chance to become the Godly Sword Sect's sect leader, Yin Dao couldn't help but be excited. If he really became the Godly Sword Sect's sect leader, then it wouldn't be as simple as being respected by others, but rather, he would become a powerful figure in the South region. Thinking of the future, everyone would talk about his name after a meal. Not only that, when they talked about his name, everyone's face would be filled with worship. Thinking of this, Yin Dao suddenly felt that Shui Lingzi in front of him had become very small. Not only that, even Li Shan, who wasn't far away, the Godly Sword Sect's protector that made him tremble with fear, had become insignificant when he thought of this. If he became the Godly Sword Sect's sect leader, then Shui Lingzi would bow and greet him, and Li Shan would nod and bow to him. Thinking of this, Yin Dao felt a surge of heat from his heart, crazily rushing into his brain, making him feel a little dizzy. At this time, Shui Lingzi's voice sounded. Yin Dao, don't worry. As long as you become my disciple, I will teach you carefully and let you realize your dream. Hearing the word dream, Yin Dao's heart couldn't hold back anymore. What was a dream? When Yin Dao was young, he dreamed of becoming the Godly Sword Sect's sect leader. It was also because of this that he joined the Godly Sword sect with this dream. He dreamed of one day becoming the sect leader of the Godly Sword sect through his own hard work. But unfortunately, dreams were just dreams. When one woke up from a dream, the dream was gone. After Yin Dao joined the Godly Sword sect, he suddenly realized that he wasn't the strongest. Not only was he not the strongest, but his talent could barely be considered average. For a disciple with average talent to stand out among the many disciples, it was simply a dream. After so many years, Yin Dao's dream had long been shattered by reality. However, the shadow of this dream still existed in his heart. If there was a chance, he would seize this dream and fulfill his childhood wish. Now, Yin Dao was very clear that he was only one step away from his dream. And this step was like the gap between heaven and earth. He would never be able to cross it. Chapter 523. Looking at Water Spirit in front of him, Yin Dao knew that his chance to realize his dream had come. As long as he could get that level 25 equipment, he would have a chance to realize his dream. As long as he could become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect, he believed that with his own efforts, he would be able to obtain an important position in the Godly Knife sect. At that time, he would really have a chance to become the sect master of the Godly Knife sect. Thinking of this, Yin Dao abruptly closed his eyes and carefully thought about whether this plan could be implemented or not. After a while, Water Spirit saw Yin Dao slowly open his eyes. At the same time, the corner of his mouth rose into a sneer. Seeing this sneer, Shui Lingzi inwardly cursed and hurriedly asked, Yin Dao, what do you think? Are you willing to become my disciple? Yin Dao sneered and shook his head. Water Spirit, I will not agree to your request. I will also not become your disciple. As long as you give me that level 25 equipment, I will become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's sect master. Why would I become your disciple? Water Spirit stared at Yin Dao dumbfoundedly. After a while, she reacted, Yin Dao, do you really think that the godly knife sect master will accept you as a disciple? Hearing Water Spirit's question, Yin Dao hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Yes, as long as I have that level 25 equipment, the godly knife sect master will accept me as a disciple. Water Spirit took a deep breath and slowly said, Do you think that you will get that 25 kilograms equipment? Yin Dao looked up at Water Spirit and smiled. Water Spirit, as long as you give it to me, I will naturally have it. Seeing Yin Dao being so stubborn, Shui Lingzi suddenly sneered. Yin Dao, you're dreaming. I advise you to wake up quickly and stop having such unrealistic dreams. Hearing Water Spirit's words, the smile on Yin Dao's face quickly disappeared. Water Spirit, what do you mean? Don't you want to give it to me? Water Spirit looked up at Yin Dao and coldly said, Yin Dao, even if I give you level 25 and you become a disciple of the godly knife sect master, do you think there is any meaning to it? When Yin Dao heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Why is it meaningless? As long as I become the disciple of the godly knife sect patriarch, I might become the godly knife sect patriarch. Is this meaningless? Shui Lingzi took a step forward and sneered. Yin Dao, do you know how many disciples the godly knife sect patriarch has? Yin Dao nodded. There are 5 disciples now. Shui Lingzi stared at Yin Dao and continued to ask, Yin Dao, even if you join the godly knife sect, do you think that with your talent, you would be able to stand out among these people? Hearing this question, Yin Dao froze for a moment before shaking his head. Water Spirit, you don't need to worry about these things. You just need to give me that equipment. Everything else has nothing to do with you. Water Spirit angrily said, Why not? Do you think that equipment fell from the sky? Silver, you make it sound so easy because you don't know how much time and effort it takes to forge a piece of equipment. Not only that, but you also need to consume a lot of resources to forge a piece of equipment. Even if I gave it to you, you wouldn't be able to use it. What's the point of giving it to you? Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing. Yin Dao, I had the same thoughts as you in the past. I wanted to become an indomitable person, but the reality is not like that. You have to put in the same amount of effort to achieve the same result. Although I haven't become the patriarch of the Tiangongmen, I am already very satisfied. Because my ability is only so great, even if I became the patriarch of the Tiangongmen, I might not be able to live a better life than I am now. Since that is the case, why not choose a path that suits you? Yin Dao shook his head. Shui Lingzi, you don't need to worry about my matters. Shui Lingzi suddenly said in a low voice, Yin Dao, think about it. If you become my disciple, with my help and your hard work, you can at least become someone with my status. What's wrong with that? Do you have to become the patriarch of the godly knife sect to live a better life? Listening to Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao hesitated again. Seeing Yin Dao hesitate, Shui Lingzi hurriedly said, Yin Dao, don't hesitate. As long as you become my disciple, I won't treat you badly. Listening to Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao's heart began to waver. If he continued like this in the godly knife sect, he really wouldn't have any future. But if he became Shui Lingzi's disciple, his future would be limitless. Shui Lingzi was the patriarch of the Tiangongmen. Although her status wasn't as high as the patriarch of the Tiangongmen, she was still very respected. If he could really become someone like Shui Lingzi in the future, it would be worth it. Thinking up to here, Yin Dao was about to speak when Li Shan's voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Yin Dao, don't listen to Shui Lingzi's nonsense. Even if you become his disciple, will he teach you with all his heart? Will he make you a consecrator of the Heavens Craftsman faction? After Li Mingshan said this, he turned his head to Shui Lingzi and sneered. Shui Lingzi, don't make it sound so nice, can you really teach Yin Dao? Shui Lingzi heard this and laughed. Li Shan, do you think I'm like you? In order to get that equipment, you can watch your own disciple get injured and not treat him. Let me tell you, as long as he becomes my disciple, I will teach him carefully. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Li Shan didn't think much of it. He turned to Yin Dao and said with a smile, Yin Dao, between me and Shui Lingzi, whose martial arts are higher? Yin Dao heard this and shook his head. I don't know. Seeing that Yin Dao didn't say that his martial arts were higher, Li Shan was a little annoyed. But he also knew that this wasn't the time to get angry. Yin Dao, I see that you are also a talent. How about this? I will accept you as my disciple. What do you think? Hearing this, Yin Dao's eyes suddenly opened wide. He looked at Li Shan in disbelief. Li Shan was the guardian of the Godly Blade sect. His martial arts were naturally unfathomable. If he could become his disciple, it would definitely be a good thing. Usually, Li Shan was very strict with his disciples. When Yin Dao saw Li Shan, he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. But now, Li Shan actually wanted to accept him as his disciple. This was really beyond Yin Dao's expectations. Seeing Yin Dao's shocked expression, Li Shan nodded with satisfaction and slowly said, Yin Dao, after this matter is over, I will immediately accept you as my disciple. I believe that with your talent, your martial arts will definitely advance by leaps and bounds, and you will become the pillar of the Godly Blade sect. Chapter 524. Yin Dao blankly stared at Li Shan. An inexplicable emotion was surging in his heart. Yin Dao really didn't understand why this was happening. If he heard this before coming out, Yin Dao would have fainted from excitement. But with Shui Lingzi wanting to take him in as a disciple, Li Mingshan's words didn't have that much of an impact on Yin Daoist. Yin Dao was now carefully thinking about how much sincerity these two people had in their word. There was no doubt that Shui Lingzi's purpose in saying this was because of the level 25 equipment. She had no choice but to use this method to solve this problem. And Li Shan's purpose in saying this should be because he was afraid that Yin Dao would be tempted by Shui Lingzi's offer. His purpose was naturally to not let Yin Dao become Shui Lingzi's disciple. After hearing Li Shan's words, Shui Lingzi secretly cursed him for being shameless. She changed her tactics and no longer used fighting to solve this problem, but using benefits to solve it. Speaking of this, would Shui Lingzi be afraid? Shui Lingzi absolutely wasn't afraid. At worst, she would give Yin Dao more benefits and have him join her side. Thinking of this, Shui Lingzi looked at Yin Dao with a smile and said, Yin Dao, listen to me. As long as you become my disciple, I will wholeheartedly train you and make you a person who will be respected in the future. Li Shan sneered, Shui Lingzi, do you think that if Yin Dao becomes my disciple, he won't become a person who will be respected in the future? Shui Lingzi shook her head. Li Shan, this isn't the same. Our Tiangongmen is a big sect that makes equipment. It's not that I want to boast, but 70% of the equipment in the South region is made by our Tiangongmen. Speaking of this, Shui Lingzi paused and turned to look at Yin Dao before continuing. Yin Dao, think about it. Every day, how many people will come to you to buy equipment? At that time, how many people in the South region won't know you? As long as you join our Tiangongmen, you will naturally experience this benefit in the future. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao's eyes lit up. Water Spirit's words were absolutely not a lie, they were the truth. The Tiangongmen were a big sect that specialized in making equipment. Although they would make a lot of equipment every day, there were too many people who needed equipment. Everyone wanted to get a good piece of equipment, so naturally, they would go to the Tiangongmen to talk. Thinking of this, Yin Dao was moved. If he could become Shui Lingzi's disciple, then even if he didn't become a consecrator of the Tiangongmen, he could still become an elder of the Tiangongmen. Thinking of this, Yin Dao was about to speak when Li Mingshan saw that the situation wasn't good. He quickly waved his hand and said, Yin Dao, you need to listen to Shui Lingzi's nonsense. At this point, Li Mingshan paused. He turned his head and glared at Shui Lingzi before continuing. Although the Heaven's Craftsman sect is a large equipment-making sect and there are many people who ask them for help, don't forget which sect is the most powerful in the South County. At this point, Li Shan coldly snorted and proudly said, "Of course it's our Godly Sword sect. The Godly Sword sect's strength is invincible in the South region. No other sect can be compared to them." At this point, Li Shan turned to look at Shui Lingzi and asked with a smile, "Shui Lingzi, am I right?" Hearing Li Shan's question, Shui Lingzi was annoyed, but she couldn't refute. The Godly Sword sect's strength was indeed huge. In terms of martial arts, they were almost invincible in the South region. However, although the Godly Sword sect was strong, it was impossible for Shui Lingzi to admit it in front of Yin Dao. Speaking up to hear, Shui Lingzi sneered, "Li Mingshan, aren't you bragging a bit? What invincible Godly Saber sect? What #1 sect in the southern region? Have you forgotten that the #1 sect in the southern region is the Heavenly Sword sect?" Hearing this, Li Shan sneered, "Shui Lingzi, everyone knows that the Sky Sword sect is not our Godly Sword sect's opponent. You don't even know this 3-year-old child's question. Do you still deserve to be a consecrator of the Tiangongmen?" At this point, Li Mingshan paused for a moment before he continued. "I forgot that the Heaven's Craftsman sect is only a small sect that makes equipment. It's not surprising that you don't know this. I don't blame you enough." Hearing Li Mingshan's words, Shui Lingzi couldn't help but get angry. He rolled his eyes and suddenly said with a smile, "I'm indeed a bit ignorant, but why did I hear that in the last competition between the Sky Sword sect and the Godly Sword sect, the Godly Sword sect lost?" Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, a cold light flashed in Li Mingshan's eyes. He took a step forward and angrily said, "Shui Lingzi, don't talk nonsense. Last time, the Sky Sword sect cheated, so we lost by half a move. If it was a fair competition, the Sky Sword sect would definitely not be our Godly Blade sect's opponent." Shui Lingzi sneered, "Is that so? I don't think so. In a competition, no matter what the reason is, the winner is respected. If you lose, then don't talk big. Shui Lingzi, you're courting death." Hearing Shui Lingzi insulting the Godly Sword sect, Li Shan suddenly grabbed the handle of his sword and angrily said, "Shui Lingzi, I hope you take back what you just said." Shui Lingzi indifferently shook her head. "I didn't say anything wrong. Why should I take it back?" Speaking up to hear, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing, "What I said is the truth. I'm not the only one who said this. Everyone in the South region knows this. Do you want to kill everyone in the South region?" Li Shan sternly said, "I don't care what others say, but since you, Shui Lingzi, said it today, I must take care of it." Shui Lingzi shook her head. "Since you want to take care of it, then I also want to see what kind of ability the second largest sect in the South region, the Godly Sword sect, has." Hearing Shui Lingzi's provocation, Li Shan couldn't bear it anymore. Shadowless, who was on the side, hurriedly tried to stop him, but it was too late. Shadowless only saw a flash of sword light in front of him, and a cold light attacked Shui Lingzi. Seeing Li Shan suddenly make a move, Shui Lingzi didn't dare to be careless. She quickly jumped and dodged Li Shan's sword. Then with a low roar, her left foot circled and kicked towards Li Shan's back. Li Shan angrily attacked, but after slashing out with his saber, his mind suddenly became clear. Recalling Shadowless's words, he began to regret his actions. Seeing Shui Lingzi's kick coming at him, he didn't want to fight any longer, so he forcefully stomped on the ground and jumped back to his original position. Li Shan sheathed his sword and turned to Shui Lingzi and slowly said, "Shui Lingzi, let's not fight anymore." Chapter 525. When Shui Lingzi saw Li Shan attack, she immediately retreated. After hearing his words, she sneered in her heart. She knew what Li Shan was planning. "Li Shan, you were the one who started it. Why are you blaming me?" Li Shan shook his head. It doesn't matter who I blame. What matters is that I won't attack again. Shui Lingzi sneered. I hope you're telling the truth. Li Shan no longer paid attention to Shui Lingzi. He turned to look at Yin Dao and sincerely said, Yin Dao, you've been in the Godly Blade sect for so many years. I don't need to tell you the strength of the Godly Blade sect. After you become Shui Lingzi's disciple, you'll become a respected person. However, after you become my disciple, you'll become a person that everyone will fear. Speaking up to here, Li Shan paused for a moment before continuing. Yin Dao, do you understand what I'm saying? We, the disciples of the Godly Blade sect, rely on the blade in our hands. As long as our blade technique is invincible, people will naturally fear us. We'll become the strongest in the South region. Isn't that good? Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao subconsciously looked at the blade in Li Shan's hand. He was somewhat excited. He joined the Godly Blade sect for his own ideals. On the other hand, it was also for the Godly Blade sect's supreme martial art. When he thought about the saber light splashing everywhere like lightning, that dazzling light was exactly what Yin Dao was looking forward to. Thinking up to here, Yin Dao's mood was surging. He wanted to become such a person. He wanted to become the strongest in the South region. Shui Lingzi saw Yin Dao's expression and immediately became anxious. She quickly stepped forward and said, Yin Dao, you can't. Even if you become his disciple and learn all of his martial arts, there will still be opponents in the South region. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi suddenly sighed. Yin Dao, since you joined the Godly Blade sect, how many disciples have died because of you? I'm afraid you know better than me. Even if your martial arts are strong, can you withstand the siege of so many experts? Impossible, Yin Dao, let me tell you, this is absolutely impossible. No matter how strong your martial arts are, there will still be more experts besieging you. In the end, there will only be one path. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing, but if you become my disciple, it will be different. Tiangongmen is not a place to fight, but a place to make equipment. I can guarantee that no sect in the South region will think of becoming enemies with the Tiangongmen because if they do so, the Tiangongmen will not sell equipment to them. So, although they are not famous for their martial arts, no one will dare to bully them. Most importantly, there is absolutely no danger, because no one would think of threatening someone from the Heaven's Craftsman faction. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao's mind became active again. Ever since he joined the Godly Saber School, there were indeed many experts who fell in battle with the enemy. In his memory, there was a protector of the Godly Saber School who was besieged by the enemy and died. Although the Godly Saber School later sent a large number of people to annihilate this group of enemies, it proved that the protector of the Godly Saber School had fallen forever and would never come back to life. Thinking up to here, Yin Dao felt that this was not the life he wanted. He wanted to become an expert, an invincible expert. As long as he made a move, no one would be able to block his move. Yin Dao's dream was to become such an invincible expert. As long as he appeared, his enemies would be scared out of their wits and run away. As long as he attacked, no matter how strong the enemy's fortress was, it would collapse under his godlike saber technique. However, Yin Dao's dream could not be realized by Li Shan, because Li Shan was the protector of the Godly Blade sect. Even Li Shan himself could fall, not to mention Yin Dao himself. Thinking up to here, Yin Dao raised his head and looked at Li Shan. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Li Shan say with a smile, Yin Dao, I know your talent is very good. If you only practice martial arts with me, it would be a bit unfair for you. I have an idea. I heard that the 6th disciple of the Godly Blade sect wants to accept a disciple. Do you have the same idea? Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao was so excited that even his eyebrows jumped. He immediately said with a somewhat hoarse voice, Protector, I am willing. Looking at Yin Dao's anxious look, Li Shan sneered in his heart. An ignorant kid who looked down on him and wanted to become the disciple of the sixth disciple of the godly blade sect was simply a fool's dream. If there was such a good thing, Li Shan would have already gone. How could he wait for Yin Dao? One had to know that becoming the disciple of the sixth disciple of the godly blade sect was a very glorious thing. If there were no accidents, he might even become the godly blade sect's patriarch. The position of the godly blade sect's patriarch was the ultimate dream of everyone in the godly blade sect. Yin Dao was not the only one who had this ultimate dream. Li Shan had this dream for dozens of years. How could Yin Dao know Li Shan's thoughts? His mind was blank. There was only one thought that kept going back and forth. I want to become the disciple of the sixth disciple of the godly blade sect. I want to become the sixth disciple of the godly blade sect's patriarch. This thought kept going back and forth in Yin Dao's mind. It made him so excited that his whole body was trembling. At this moment, Yin Dao had already forgotten about Shui Lingzi's words. The only thought in his mind was to become the sixth disciple of the godly blade sect's patriarch. Shui Lingzi saw that something was wrong and hurriedly said, Yin Dao, don't listen to Li Shan's nonsense. If there was such an opportunity, he would have already gone. Why would he think of you? Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao suddenly felt as if he was struck by lightning. His body shook as he turned to look at Li Shan and asked with some doubt, Mr. Protector, is what Shui Lingzi said true? At this moment, Li Shan wanted to beat Shui Lingzi into a pulp. But in front of Yin Dao, he could not do so. He could only smile and ask, Yin Dao, have I ever lied to you? Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao shook his head. Li Shan did not lie to him because the two of them had never met before. In Yin Dao's memory, every time Li Shan saw him, he had a very arrogant look on his face. The conversation between the two of them was always Li Shan reprimanding him. But even so, Yin Dao was sure that Li Shan did not lie to him. Thinking of this, Yin Dao subconsciously nodded. Seeing this, Shui Lingzi sneered. Yin Dao, since this is the case, let me ask you. Has Li Shan talked to you before? Hearing this, Yin Dao paused for a moment and then nodded. Mr. Protector has talked to me before. Chapter 526. Hearing Yin Dao's answer, Shui Lingzi sneered. Yin Dao, then tell me, was your protector this good to you before? Speaking up to hear, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing. Did your protector say that he wanted to accept you as his disciple before? Yin Dao shook his head. No. Shui Lingzi sneered. Since he didn't say it before, why would he say it now? Speaking up to hear, Shui Lingzi didn't wait for Yin Dao to reply and continued. Yin Dao, I believe that even if I don't say it, you should know what is going on. Do you think that Li Shan's words are true? Just as Shui Lingzi finished speaking, before Yin Dao could reply, Li Mingshan sneered. Shui Lingzi, when did I say I wanted to take Yin Dao as a disciple? I only said that I wanted to recommend him to the godly knife sect's sixth disciple. Didn't you hear me? Speaking up to hear, Shui Lingzi suddenly laughed. Li Shan, do you think that anyone will believe you when you say that? Speaking up to hear, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before turning to look at Li Shan and sneered again. I don't know how your relationship with the sixth disciple of the godly knife sect is? Hearing this, Li Shan's face suddenly changed. Shui Lingzi, the relationship between us doesn't seem to need you to care. Shui Lingzi turned to look at Yin Dao and sighed. I naturally don't want to care about your matters, but I feel pity for Yin Dao. I'm afraid he was deceived by you and doesn't know it. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao's face also changed. Under the agitation of his emotions, he once again coughed violently. After coughing for a while, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing the blood that Yin Dao spat out, Shui Lingzi felt some pity for him. But then she thought that as long as Yin Dao's injuries were healed, he would continue to pester her and try to achieve his impossible goal. Thinking of this, Shui Lingzi's pity suddenly disappeared. What remained was a trace of expectation. She hoped that Silver Saber would cough a few more times and spit out a few mouthfuls of blood before dying. That would save her a lot of trouble. Shui Lingzi was very clear that if it wasn't for this reckless silver knife pestering her here, then she would have already finished her task. In the end, it was this damn guy who was obstructing her. If he could disappear, then that would be the best thing that could happen to her. However, although Shui Lingzi was thinking this, her expression didn't change at all. Not only that, her face was filled with concern. "Yin Dao, are you alright? Why don't you let them treat you?" Yin Dao spat out a mouthful of blood and felt a lot more comfortable. After hearing Shui Ling's words, he slowly shook his head but didn't say anything. Yin Dao was considering things. He was considering Shui Lingzi and Li Mingshan's words, trying to figure out what would be best for him. Li Shan wanted to recommend him to the sixth disciple of the Godly Knife sect, but Yin Dao didn't know whether this was true or not. In the Godly Knife sect, as a low-level disciple, it was impossible for him to know about high-level matters. Just like Shui Lingzi's question, Yin Dao didn't know what the relationship between Li Shan and the sixth disciple of the Godly Knife sect was. So Yin Dao was thinking, what should he do? If he chose to be Shui Lingzi's disciple, he didn't know how long it would take, but he would eventually get a position in the Tiangongmen. But if he chose Li Shan, he would be able to recommend him to the sixth disciple of the Godly Knife sect. If there were no accidents, then the next Godly Knife sect's patriarch position would definitely be selected from the six disciples of the Godly Knife sect. Of course, there was also the possibility that the position of the patriarch would be taken by another disciple. But this wasn't easy. Unless one had outstanding contributions or had the ability to suppress others, other than the six disciples of the Godly Knife sect, no one else would have a chance. The most important thing now was whether what Li Shan said was true or false. If it was true, then he would have a chance to stand out in the future. But if it was false, then he would have been tricked and lost the chance to become an elder of the Tiangongmen. But was what Shui Lingzi said true? Why did Shui Lingzi accept him as her disciple? Wasn't it because of that level 25 equipment? Yin Dao was very clear that Shui Lingzi was very angry and wanted to accept him as her disciple in order to get rid of that level 25 equipment. Under this kind of situation, was becoming her disciple really the right choice? Yin Dao hesitated for a moment, not knowing what to choose. Seeing this, Shui Lingzi hurriedly said, "Yin Dao, are you worried that I'll go back on my words?" Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao raised his head and looked at Shui Lingzi. This was because Shui Lingzi's words were exactly what he wanted to know. How could Shui Lingzi guarantee that what he said was true and not a choice made out of helplessness? Shui Lingzi looked at the crowd and said with a smile, "Yin Dao, you can see that there are so many people here. Do you think that if I go back on my words, they won't spread this matter?" Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing, "Yin Dao, you have to know that if I agree to accept you as my disciple and then don't accept you as my disciple, once this matter spreads out, it will be a huge blow to my reputation. We Tiangongmen have always been honest people. Once this matter occurs, I'm afraid that I, Shui Lingzi, won't be able to stay in the Tiangongmen anymore." Shui Lingzi turned to look at Yin Dao and said with a smile, "Yin Dao, come, join us Tiangongmen. This is the best choice for you." To be honest, Shui Lingzi wasn't afraid that others would go back on their words because no one would say such a thing. Yin Dao's injuries were so heavy that he could die at any time. Even if he really did die, it wouldn't be strange. More importantly, Shui Lingzi knew that Li Shan wasn't a good-tempered person. Once Yin Dao agreed to join the Tiangongmen, his first reaction would be to cut Yin Dao in half. If that really happened, Shui Lingzi wouldn't stop him because it would be a great thing for her. As long as Yin Dao was gone, the conditions would naturally be gone. Wasn't this the best result? Shui Lingzi's biggest task right now was to persuade Yin Dao. As for other things, Shui Lingzi wasn't worried at all. After hearing Water Spirit's words, Yin Dao subconsciously looked around. Seeing that there were so many people around, he began to believe her word. Among these people, there were many famous people in the South region. Especially Wu Lai and Du Wudai, they were famous and no one dared to underestimate them. Wu Kudi and Wu Ying were slightly weaker. Chapter 527. Wu Kudi and Wu Ying were also not to be underestimated. Although their reputation was not as high as Wu Lai and Du Wudai, they were still influential figures in the South region. With so many people present, if Shui Lingzi dared to go back on her words, these people would definitely spread the news. And the consequences would be the same as Shui Lingzi said. He would not be able to stay in the Tiangongmen anymore. Thinking of this, Yin Dao was slightly relieved. On the side, Li Shan saw that Yin Dao's face relaxed and knew that this kid believed Shui Lingzi's words. Li Shan cursed Yin Dao's ignorance in his heart and hurriedly said, Yin Dao, we don't care if what Shui Lingzi said is true or false, but you must believe what I said. Speaking of this, Li Shan paused. Seeing that Yin Dao was looking at him, he continued, Yin Dao, there are so many witnesses here. Do you think I would lie? If I didn't have a certain amount of confidence, why would I say such words to you? If I lie to you, it won't do me any good. Please believe me. Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao asked with a hoarse voice, Lord Protector, what did you just say? Li Shan gritted his teeth and slowly said, Yin Dao, I'm going to recommend you to the 6 disciples of the Godly Knife sect. What do you think? Yin Dao heard this and nodded. Okay, for such a good condition, Yin Dao was ready to agree. But before he could say a word, he was interrupted by Shui Lingzi on the side. Seeing that Yin Dao had noticed her, Shui Lingzi sneered and said, Yin Dao, have you forgotten your current situation? Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao was stunned for a moment. He turned to look at Shui Lingzi and asked word by word, Shui Lingzi, what do you mean by this? Shui Lingzi shook her head. Nothing, I just want to tell you a fact. Speaking of this, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing. Yin Dao, do you think you are a material for martial arts? Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao's eyes widened as he fiercely glared at Shui Lingzi. Shui Lingzi, what did you say? Water Spirit shook her head indifferently. It's nothing, I just wanted to tell you that you are seriously injured at this moment. Even if you are treated now, it will be quite difficult for you to make any progress in your martial arts. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused and turned to look at Yin Dao. She didn't care about Yin Dao's angry eyes and continued, Yin Dao, you're a smart person, you should be able to feel it yourself. Yin Dao stared at Shui Lingzi for a long time before angrily saying, Shui Lingzi, you dare to look down on me? Do you think I'm not suitable for martial arts? Hearing Yin Dao's words, Shui Lingzi nodded. Yin Dao, you are right this time. Even if you are not seriously injured, it is basically impossible for you to reach a high level in your martial arts. Hearing Shui Lingzi's impolite words, Yin Dao was finally enraged. He struggled on the ground, wanting to get up and settle accounts with Shui Lingzi, but his injuries were too heavy. No matter how hard he tried, he wasn't able to stand up. In the end, because he struggled too hard, he ended up coughing violently. Seeing this, Shui Lingzi sighed. Yin Dao, I said that your talent is really not high. No matter how much you cultivate, you will never reach the peak. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao couldn't bear it anymore. He suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Shui Lingzi, you dare to say such words, cough cough. I, cough cough. Yin Dao's angry words were interrupted by a violent cough before he could finish. Shui Lingzi took a step forward and slowly said, Yin Dao, don't mind what I just said, because what I said is the truth. Who told you not to accept it, but it is indeed the truth. At this point, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing, so let me tell you, even if Li Mingshan recommends you to become the 6th disciple of the Godly Knife sect master, you definitely won't have any future. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao was both angry and anxious. His coughing became even more severe. Not only that, but his entire body seemed to have lost its vitality at this moment. Li Mingshan on the side didn't know what Shui Lingzi wanted to do, but he didn't stop her. He wanted to see what kind of trick Shui Lingzi wanted to play. Li Mingshan wasn't worried about what trick Shui Lingzi wanted to play. With the Godly Knife sect's 6th disciple card, he didn't believe that Yin Dao could escape from his hands. What was Yin Dao's goal today? Wasn't it to become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's patriarch? Now that Li Mingshan gave him this opportunity, Li Mingshan didn't believe that Yin Dao would give up this dream opportunity. In fact, if there was such an opportunity, Li Mingshan wouldn't let it go either. Being the 6th disciple of the Godly Knife sect's patriarch was Li Mingshan's trump card, and also his capital. He believed that as long as he held this card, no matter what Shui Lingzi wanted to say or what tricks she wanted to play, she would never be able to resist his trump card. Shui Lingzi didn't say anything and just quietly looked at Yin Dao. She just looked at Yin Dao, who was constantly coughing and occasionally spitting out a mouthful of blood. After a while, Yin Dao felt a lot better. He slowly raised his head and looked at Shui Lingzi. Suddenly, he felt that his head was very heavy, so heavy that it was difficult for him to even raise his head. Shui Lingzi, you're talking nonsense. Although my injuries are heavy, there is absolutely no problem. At this moment, Li Mingshan also smiled and said, Yin Dao, you're right. Although our Godly Knife sect doesn't produce equipment, our sect has some precious medicines that can be given to you. When the time comes, your injuries will definitely be cured. Hearing Li Mingshan's words, Yin Dao was suddenly overjoyed and hurriedly asked, Really, Lord Protector? Li Mingshan nodded. Really, I won't lie to you. Yin Dao heard this and turned to look at Shui Lingzi and said with a sneer, Shui Lingzi, after hearing Lord Protector's words, are you disappointed? Shui Lingzi shook her head. I'm not disappointed. I just said that even if you weren't injured, with your martial talent, it would be absolutely difficult for you to cultivate to the peak. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi turned to look at Li Mingshan and asked with a sneer, Li Mingshan, as the Godly Knife sect's protector, you should have a clear understanding of Yin Dao's talent. Why don't you tell Yin Dao what his martial arts aptitude is like? Hearing Shui Lingzi's question, Li Mingshan was stunned for a moment and didn't immediately answer. As the protector of the Godly Knife sect, he naturally knew about Yin Dao's martial talent. Chapter 528. Li Shanshan was very clear about Yin Dao's aptitude. Yin Dao's aptitude for martial arts was considered low in the Godly Knife sect. This was not to say that Yin Dao's aptitude for martial arts was low, but because the Godly Knife sect only had 2 grades. One was the aptitude for martial arts and the other was the low grade. When a disciple entered the Godly Knife sect, they would go through various tests. If they were extremely talented, they would naturally be taken in as a disciple by someone with high status. As for those who were not very talented, they would be taken in as a disciple by an ordinary senior disciple. After these people finished their apprenticeship, they would only become a senior disciple and would not have a bright future. Yin Dao's master was a senior disciple and did not have any status in the Godly Knife sect. This fully explained Yin Dao's talent in martial art. After hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Li Shanshan did not know how to respond. Seeing this, Shui Lingzi sneered for a while and suddenly said, Li Shanshan, why aren't you answering my question? Is there something you can't say? Hearing Shui Lingzi's question, Li Shanshan snorted, Shui Lingzi, this matter is our Godly Knife sect's secret. It seems like you Tiangongmen have no right to interfere. Shui Lingzi shook her head. I don't want to interfere with your godly knife sex matters. I just want to know the truth. Li Shan sneered. Do you think I will tell an outsider about our godly knife sex matters? Hearing Li Shan's answer, Shui Lingzi suddenly sighed and turned her head to look at Yin Dao. Yin Dao, I heard that in the godly knife sect, those with extremely high talent will be groomed by those with extremely high martial arts. Speaking to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing. Yin Dao, tell me, what level of expert is your master in the godly knife sect? Hearing Shui Lingzi's question, Yin Dao couldn't help but frown. Shui Lingzi, why do you want to know this? What does it have to do with you? Do you need to know who my master is? Speaking up to here, Yin Dao paused for a moment before continuing. Water Spirit, since you look down on my martial arts talent, then don't talk nonsense and quickly compensate me with equipment. Hearing Yin Dao's answer, Li Shan laughed. Water Spirit, if you have something to say, then say it quickly. Since you look down on Yin Dao's martial talent, then don't talk about it anymore. Think of a way to get those equipment. Shui Lingzi ignored Li Mingshan's clamor and just stared at the silver knife as she slowly said. Yin Dao, I'm just saying this to tell you that even before you were seriously injured, your talent in martial arts was not very good. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing. Not to mention, you are now seriously injured. Even if you can recover from your injuries, it will have a great impact on your martial arts. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao angrily said, You don't need to care about my martial arts talent. Hurry up and compensate me with equipment. Shui Lingzi ignored Yin Dao's roar and continued, Yin Dao, with your current martial arts talent, even if you were to become the sixth disciple of the godly knife sex patriarch, I'm afraid your martial arts won't improve by much. If you do that, then you won't have a chance to stand out. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused and turned to look at Yin Dao before continuing. Yin Dao, do you understand what I mean? Yin Dao was so angry that he coughed again. After coughing, he reluctantly said, Shui Lingzi, if you are mocking me, then go ahead. I don't care, I just want my level 25 equipment. Shui Lingzi shook her head. Even if I give you that level 25 equipment and you become the godly knife sex patriarch's disciple, if your martial arts talent isn't good enough, you won't be able to practice high-level martial arts. What's the use of that? Yin Dao was so angry at Shui Lingzi's words that his whole body trembled. He pointed at Shui Lingzi and sternly said, Shui Lingzi, you don't need to care about my matters. You don't need to care about my matters? Shui Lingzi's words suddenly exploded in Yin Dao's mind. It was as if a thunderbolt had exploded in his head, causing his mind to regain a trace of clarity. Yin Dao understood that Shui Lingzi was right. With his martial arts talent, even if he were to become the disciple of the godly knife sex patriarch, he wouldn't have a chance to stand out. The godly knife sect was founded on martial arts. Naturally, the disciples of the sect would be judged based on their martial art. If he wanted to become the patriarch of the godly knife sect, no matter how many people recommended him or how great his ability was, as long as his martial arts didn't reach the standard, it would all be in vain. Thinking of this and thinking of his own situation, Yin Dao was suddenly afraid. Was everything he had done worth it? Even if Shui Lingzi gave him a level 25 equipment and he gave it to the godly knife sex patriarch and successfully became the godly knife sex patriarch's disciple, with his martial arts talent, would he really be able to stand out among the other disciples? Thinking about this, Yin Dao's forehead began to sweat. He was now regretting his actions. Seeing Yin Dao's appearance, Shui Lingzi already knew what he was thinking. She sneered in her heart and was about to say something when Li Shan saw that the situation wasn't good. Yin Dao, you don't need to be discouraged. As long as you work hard and have the guidance of a great teacher, you will definitely achieve something. Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao's mood didn't improve by much. After he joined the Godly Knife sect, he had always been in the lower levels of the sect. Most of the people he came in contact with were people like him who didn't have much talent. Every time these disciples heard that some talented disciple had learned some martial arts, they would be envious. However, it was only envy because other people's talent couldn't be compared. There was a big difference between an extremely talented disciple and an extremely untalented disciple. A type of martial arts could be learned by both the extremely talented and the extremely untalented disciples. Although both disciples could learn this type of martial arts, there was a big difference between them. An extremely talented disciple might be able to learn this type of martial arts in 7 days and grasp the trick, achieving twice the result with half the effort. An extremely untalented disciple might be able to learn this type of martial arts in half a year, as long as he worked hard. However, it would take a lot of practice to grasp the trick. The difference between these two groups of disciples was time. After all, a person's time was limited. Naturally, the shorter the time they had to learn each type of martial arts, the better. On this point, the extremely untalented disciple would lose at the starting line. For this type of disciple, no matter which sect it was, they wouldn't spend a lot of effort to cultivate them. Chapter 529. No sect would spend a lot of effort to cultivate a person with poor talent, because not only would it waste a lot of resources, but it would also waste a lot of time. But in the end, the disciples who wasted so much time and resources would never reach the peak of martial arts. Therefore, no sect would spend a lot of effort to cultivate a person with poor talent, not because they were heartless, but because they had no other choice. After hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao silently nodded, but didn't say anything. Seeing this, Li Shan hurriedly continued, Yin Dao, if you join the Godly Knife sect's 6th disciple, I believe that with his guidance, your martial arts will definitely improve greatly. Speaking up to here, Li Shan's tone paused for a moment before continuing, Yin Dao, believe me, the Godly Knife sect's 6th disciple has some reputation in the Godly Knife sect. I believe that with his guidance, you definitely won't have any problems. Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao's eyes suddenly lit up. He seemed to have heard of this matter before. It seemed to be true. The disciples of the Godly Knife sect's 6th disciple were all people with high martial art. In addition to their own high talent, it also had a lot to do with their master's teachings. Thinking up to here, Yin Dao actually had some expectations. He raised his head to look at Li Shan and was about to speak when Shui Lingzi suddenly sneered. Yin Dao, stop dreaming. Even if the disciples of the Godly Knife sect's 6th disciple were all taught high martial arts, I believe that they all have extremely high talent in martial arts. The reason why their martial arts are so high is probably not just because of their master's teachings. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing, Yin Dao, you've practiced martial arts for so many years, don't you understand that if your talent in martial arts isn't good enough, then no matter how hard you train, you'll only be a little bit stronger than others of the same talent. A person with poor talent in martial arts, compared to a person with high talent in martial arts, Yin Dao, I can clearly tell you that the difference is like heaven and earth. There is no way to compare. If you want to compare, then you can only dream. After hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Li Shan very much agreed with her words, but at this moment, he absolutely couldn't accept it. Shui Lingzi, you are talking nonsense again. In Jianghu, how many people with mediocre talent have become experts? Haven't you heard of these? Speaking up to here, Li Shan paused. He turned his head to look at Yin Dao, then continued, Yin Dao, don't listen to Shui Lingzi's nonsense. There are too many people who don't have high talent in martial arts, but through their hard work, they were able to succeed. I believe that with your perseverance, you will succeed. Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao's originally dim eyes slowly began to light up. Thinking up to here, Yin Dao looked up at Li Shan and anxiously asked, Lord Protector, can I really do it? Li Shan nodded and said with a smile, Yin Dao, you can definitely do it. You have extraordinary perseverance and diligence. I believe that as long as you have the guidance of a great teacher, you will definitely succeed. Hearing Li Shan's approval, Yin Dao's eyes lit up. His originally disappointed heart began to beat fiercely. Just as Yin Dao was about to shout out in excitement, Shui Lingzi coldly said, Don't dream about it. Yin Dao, stop dreaming. No matter how hard you work, you won't be able to achieve that kind of success. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao suddenly became angry. In a fit of anger, he miraculously sat up. Although Yin Dao sat up, he once again began to cough violently. The coughing was so violent that his body couldn't help but sway. Suddenly, a strange sound came from Yin Dao's throat. In the next moment, he once again spat out a mouthful of blood. Yin Dao struggled for a long time before he was able to endure this uncomfortable feeling. He pointed at Shui Lingzi and angrily said, Shui Lingzi, why do you want to go against me? Lord Protector has clearly said that as long as I work hard, I will definitely succeed. What are your intentions? Shui Lingzi, you and I cannot exist under the same sky. Hearing this, Shui Lingzi coldly smiled. Her eyes stared at Yin Dao as she slowly said, Yin Dao, with your low aptitude, you still want to become a generation's master? After listening to Shui Lingzi's question, Yin Dao subconsciously looked at Li Mingshan before turning to Shui Lingzi and sternly saying, Shui Lingzi, there are so many mediocre people in Jianghu, but they can become masters of their generation, so why can't I? I have more perseverance than them, I have more determination than them, I'm more diligent than them, they can become masters, so why can't I? Shui Lingzi looked at Yin Dao and suddenly sighed. Yin Dao, even if you have more perseverance and diligence than them, it is still far from enough. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing, Yin Dao, these people with mediocre aptitude, the reason why they can become experts of their generation is not because they have more perseverance than others, nor is it because they are more determined than others, nor is it because they are more hard-working than others. Rather, it is because they have more resources than others. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi saw that Yin Dao was about to speak, so she immediately waved her hand to interrupt him and continued to speak. These people who can become masters all have one thing in common, and that is that they have resources. Do you think that hard work alone is enough? Impossible. If you work hard for 10 or 20 years, others only need 1,000-year-old ginseng and can solve it in 3 days. If you have the perseverance to cultivate in a mountain of blades and sea of flames, you can suffer hardships that others can't, but others can cultivate in a warm house and use all kinds of elixirs to achieve this goal. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi turned to look at Yin Dao and sighed. Yin Dao, tell me, do you have these? Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao's eyes opened wide as he stared blankly at the darkness in front of him. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly roared towards the sky. Ah, the roar was so mournful and filled with unwillingness. Seeing this, Li Shan also sighed in his heart. How could he not know what Shui Lingzi was talking about? Needless to say, even he himself had suffered such a loss. Li Shan was really diligent when cultivating. Chapter 530. Li Shan was very diligent in his cultivation, and his talent was above average. It was reasonable to say that he should have a higher achievement, but he could only become a protector of the godly knife sect. Li Shan had seen many people whose talent was not as good as his, but with a large number of spirit herbs, their strength would increase by leaps and bounds, and they would soon surpass him. There were too many examples like this, and Li Shan did not want to think about it anymore. It was meaningless, and he could only blame himself for not having enough spirit herbs to increase his strength. Yin Dao's roar resounded in Li Shan's ears. He wanted to go forward and persuade Yin Dao not to be so stupid, but after thinking about it, he did not do so. Yin Dao's current state was like that of a madman. Just imagine, how could you reason with a madman? After roaring for a while, Yin Dao lowered his head and looked at Li Shan and asked in a hoarse voice, "Lord Protector, is what Shui Lingzi said true?" Hearing Yin Dao's question, Li Shan was stunned for a moment. Taking this opportunity, he thought for a moment and then slowly said, "Shui Lingzi is right. If you want to learn a top martial art, you do need a lot of spirit herbs to nourish yourself." Speaking up to here, Li Shan paused for a moment and then continued, "Yin Dao, do you know why everyone wants to become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect?" Yin Dao clenched his teeth and stared at Li Shan, but did not answer. He simply ignored Li Shan's question. Li Shan ignored Yin Dao's attitude and continued, "In the Godly Knife sect, the Godly Knife sect's Lord has the most spirit herbs. As long as you can become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's Lord, you will have more opportunities to use those spirit herbs to nourish yourself. Therefore, this is the real reason why everyone wants to become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's Lord." Speaking up to here, Li Shan paused for a moment and then continued, "Yin Dao, as long as you can become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's Lord, as long as you practice hard, you will definitely be able to obtain spirit herbs to increase your strength." Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao's eyes suddenly lit up, and his heart suddenly understood. Li Shan's words made Yin Dao feel enlightened. That's right, why does everyone want to become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's sect leader? Everyone knew that there were too many benefits to becoming a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's sect master. Most of them wanted to say the specific benefits, but they couldn't. Today, Li Mingshan's explanation was thorough. As long as one could become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's sect master, one would have the opportunity to obtain the Godly Knife sect's sect master's elixirs to increase one's strength. After hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao finally understood, and a glimmer of hope appeared in his heart. If the leader of the Godly Knife sect was willing to teach him and give him one or two types of elixirs, then his martial arts would immediately improve by leaps and bounds. Thinking of this possibility, Silver Knife was so excited that he couldn't control himself. This was a perfect life. This was the life he needed. If the sect leader of the Godly Knife sect had really bestowed him with the elixir, it would definitely solve the problem of his lack of talent. This was something that could definitely be solved because there were too many examples. So many people who were not talented enough could become experts of their generation, so why couldn't he, Yin Dao, do the same? Yin Dao carefully thought about it, and really couldn't think of anything that was impossible. In order to practice martial arts, Yin Dao was willing to pay any price, suffer any hardship, he wouldn't mind. He had perseverance, endurance, and persistence. In short, Yin Dao had all the qualities to become a top expert of his generation. The only thing that Yin Dao lacked was the most important thing, the talent to practice martial arts. In order to practice martial arts, Yin Dao had heard people say that practicing martial arts under a waterfall would greatly improve one's martial arts and speed up one's cultivation. Yin Dao thought that it was very reasonable, so he went under the waterfall every day to practice martial arts. It was indeed very bitter. At that time, it was already autumn, and the water flowing down the waterfall was very cold and very powerful. Yin Dao stood under the waterfall, and was hit by the huge force until he was dizzy and almost died. Other than having a fever because of the cold, he didn't have any improvement in his martial art. After a few more tests, he still didn't get any improvement. Now, Yin Dao finally understood the reason. In order to become a top expert, in addition to hard work, one must have various elixirs to nourish oneself. Only then could one become stronger than others. Where did the Godly Knife sect have the most elixirs? Of course, the sect leader of the Godly Knife sect had the most elixirs. As long as he could become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's sect leader, he would have more opportunities to use these elixirs. And if he wanted to become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's sect leader, there was only one way, and that was to get that level 25 equipment. As long as he had that level 25 equipment, the Godly Knife sect's sect leader would definitely look at him in a new light and accept him as a disciple. Thinking of this, Yin Dao suddenly bowed to Li Shan Shan and said gratefully, "Many thanks for Lord Protector's reminder, this disciple will never forget it." Seeing that Yin Dao understood the meaning of his words, Li Shan Shan nodded his head in satisfaction. Of course, Li Shan Shan wasn't satisfied that Yin Dao understood the meaning of his words, but that he was very satisfied with himself. These words of deceit could only be said to Yin Dao, who was like a madman. If it was said to others, it would be of no use at all. Could it be that as long as you become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's sect leader, you would immediately get a large amount of elixirs? Yin Dao turned his head to look at Shui Lingzi and angrily said, "Shui Lingzi, what else do you have to say?" Seeing that Yin Dao was questioning her, Shui Lingzi secretly sighed in her heart. Crazy, this Yin Dao was completely crazy. He couldn't even understand these words and actually believed them. Really, Shui Lingzi pondered for a moment before slowly asking, "Yin Dao, do you think that in reality, there are a lot of elixirs? So many that you can't count them, and as long as you want to use them, you can immediately use them?" Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao was a bit unhappy. He always felt that Shui Lingzi's words were targeted at him. "Shui Lingzi, what are you trying to say? How long are you going to lie to me?" Shui Lingzi sighed, "Yin Dao, why would I lie to you?" Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi's tone paused for a moment before continuing, "Yin Dao, why do people call these elixirs rare and precious? It's because these elixirs are very rare and can't be used as freely as cabbages. Yin Dao, think about it, even if you become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect's sect leader, will the Godly Knife sect's sect leader give you those precious elixirs?" Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi didn't wait for Yin Dao to answer and continued to speak. "Yin Dao, let me tell you, this is impossible. Even if the Godly Knife sect's sect leader has some elixirs, he won't easily give it to others. Those precious elixirs were obtained with great difficulty. Why would he give it to others? Haven't you thought about it?" Chapter 531. Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao's face suddenly changed. He wanted to say a few words to defend himself, but in his heart, he faintly agreed with Shui Lingzi's words. Yes, even if the Godly Knife sect's sect master wanted to obtain the elixir, he would have to pay a huge price. Since he had paid such a huge price to obtain the elixir, why would he give it to others? Shui Lingzi saw that Yin Dao did not answer her and continued, "Yin Dao, think about it, if you had a precious elixir, would you give it to others for free?" Shui Lingzi's words were like a bolt from the blue that struck Yin Dao's mind, making him suddenly stunned. That's right, if he also had spiritual herbs, would he let others use them? Or would he use them for free? The answer was no. He had worked so hard to obtain the elixir, why would he give it to others? Why wouldn't he keep it for himself? Seeing Yin Dao's tempted appearance, Shui Lingzi sneered in her heart. He was just a fool, a few words were enough to fool him. Li Shan saw this and secretly cursed Shui Lingzi's cunning. He knew that the situation could not continue to develop like this, so he quickly sneered and said, "Yin Dao, don't listen to Shui Lingzi's nonsense. She's lying to you." Yin Dao heard this and turned to look at Li Shan. He asked with some doubt, "Lord Protector, why do I feel that Shui Lingzi's words make sense?" Speaking up to here, Yin Dao paused for a moment before continuing, "The Godly Knife sect's sect master worked so hard to obtain the elixir, why would he give it to me?" Hearing Yin Dao's words, Li Shan sneered, Yin Dao, how come you still don't understand? Our godly knife sect is so powerful, why would it be so difficult to obtain elixirs? Speaking up to here, Li Shan paused for a moment before continuing. Yin Dao, in our godly knife sect's warehouse, there are many treasures that our sect obtained together. Among these treasures, there are many elixirs. The godly knife sect's sect master has the right to decide the distribution of these elixirs. Yin Dao, the spiritual herbs in the godly saber sect's warehouse are not the personal belongings of the godly saber sect's patriarch. He only has the right to decide whether to give these spiritual herbs to a certain disciple. At this point, Li Shan paused for a moment before continuing. Yin Dao, do you think that the godly knife sect's sect master would prioritize giving these elixirs to his own disciples? After hearing Li Shan's explanation, Yin Dao's dim eyes lit up again. It was a fact that the godly knife sect had a warehouse. There were a lot of treasures in the godly sword sect's warehouse. There were equipment, weapons, elixirs, and even some strange and rare playthings. Although Yin Dao had never seen these before, he had heard of them. This was because when the godly knife faction did their missions, they would always bring back some good stuff and store it in the warehouse. As for the items stored in this warehouse, only the godly knife sect could decide which disciple would use them. Since that was the case, Li Shan must be right. The sect master of the godly knife sect had the right to decide on the use of the items in the warehouse. Naturally, he would give priority to his own disciples. Thinking of this, Yin Dao's eyes became brighter and brighter. It was as if he had grasped the dawn of his life. Even if he could not become a disciple of the godly knife sect's sect master, even if he could become a disciple of the godly knife sect's sect master's sixth disciple, there would still be many benefits for him. As for the distribution of the precious elixirs, he would definitely be given priority as a disciple of the godly knife sect's sect master. Thinking of this, Yin Dao felt his heart surging. It was as if he would step into the peak of his life in the next moment. Yin Dao was so excited that he could not control himself. He could not help but laugh to the sky to vent the joy in his heart. After a while, Yin Dao remembered Shui Lingzi. He quickly turned his head and saw Shui Lingzi looking at him with a sneer. When Yin Dao saw this sneer, it was as if he was splashed with cold water. The joy in his heart was diluted by a lot. Looking at Shui Lingzi's sneer, Yin Dao suddenly became annoyed. He pointed at Shui Lingzi and said loudly, "Shui Lingzi, you don't need to lie to me. Lord Protector is right. You have been lying to me all this time." At this point, Silver Knife paused for a moment before continuing, "Water Spirit, I'm telling you, I won't fall for your tricks again. You better hurry up and take out that level 25 equipment and this matter will be over. Otherwise, I won't let you take away the person who picked the door." Hearing Yin Dao's words, Shui Lingzi sneered and shook her head. "Yin Dao, you are too naive. Do you really think that by becoming a disciple of the godly knife sect's sect master, you will be able to obtain those elixirs?" Yin Dao fiercely stared at Shui Lingzi and angrily said, "Did you not hear what Lord Protector said?" Speaking up to here, Yin Dao didn't wait for Shui Lingzi to reply and continued, "Shui Lingzi, the godly knife sect's sect master has the right to decide the items in the warehouse, so he will definitely give priority to us, his own disciples. Shui Lingzi, since this is the case, why can't I get those elixirs?" Shui Lingzi sighed. "Yin Dao, stop dreaming. Think about it carefully. If it was you, would you give those precious elixirs to a disciple with mediocre talent?" Seeing Shui Lingzi looking down on him, Yin Dao was furious and sternly shouted, "Why can't I? Since he is your disciple, why can't he give those elixirs to me?" Shui Lingzi shook her head. "Yin Dao, think about it carefully. Would you really give those elixirs to a disciple with mediocre talent?" Yin Dao angrily said, "Why can't I? Since he is my disciple, why can't I give them to him?" Shui Lingzi faintly said, "It's like having two blades. One is an ordinary blade, while the other is a peerless blade. After saying this, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing, Yin Dao, then let me ask you. If these two blades were yours, which one would you care more about? Which one would you care more about? Yin Dao angrily said, Is there even a need to ask? Of course I would care more about that peerless blade. Hearing Yin Dao's answer, Shui Lingzi did not speak and only coldly looked at Yin Dao. Yin Dao felt uncomfortable being stared at by Shui Lingzi and angrily said, Shui Lingzi, what are you looking at? Hearing this, Shui Lingzi sighed, Yin Dao, I want to see when you will understand. Yin Dao was enraged by Shui Lingzi's attitude. Shui Lingzi, what do you mean? If you have something to say, then say it quickly. If you have nothing else to say, then hurry up and prepare that equipment. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. After hearing Yin Dao's words, Shui Lingzi sneered, Yin Dao, could it be that you still don't understand my analogy? Chapter 532. After listening to Water Spirit's words, Yin Dao angrily said, I don't understand anything, I only know that I want that level 25 equipment. If you don't give it to me, I will immediately make Kikyaman's people leave here. Let's see what you can do to me then. Looking at Yin Dao's agitated appearance, Water Spirit waved her hand and slowly said, Yin Dao, it doesn't matter if you don't understand, I will explain it to you, and you will naturally understand. At this point, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing, My analogy just now is to tell you that if you have two sabers, one is a peerless saber and the other is an ordinary saber, I think your choice will definitely be better for the peerless saber. For example, you will choose a better scabbard for the peerless sword, or add some better decorations. These are all things you might do. But for that ordinary saber, you definitely wouldn't do that. You wouldn't add a better scabbard for it, nor would you add better decorations for it. In fact, you might not even bother to wipe it. At this point, Shui Lingzi raised her head and looked at Silver Blade before continuing. This is like the relationship between the godly sword sect's leader and his disciples. The godly sword sect's leader is the master of the swords, and his disciples are the swords. Do you understand what I am saying? Hearing Water Spirit's words, Yin Dao only felt a splitting headache. For a moment he couldn't think of anything, maybe he didn't want to think, or maybe he really couldn't remember. In short, he didn't answer Water Spirit's question. Looking at Yin Dao's somewhat distorted face, Water Spirit's heart once again felt pity for him. Was there anything wrong with Yin Dao's actions? There was nothing wrong with that. He just wanted a better future. In order to have a better future, Yin Dao was willing to give up everything. This was a kind of perseverance. But was it really right for him to do this? Thinking up to here, Water Spirit's heart suddenly sighed. Such an ambitious young man, because of his bad luck, ended up like this. This time, Yin Dao's injury was definitely not simple. Not only were his injuries too severe, but the treatment wasn't timely enough. Just based on this point alone, it had already damaged his vitality greatly. If he wanted to have any future in martial arts, the only way was to rely on those elixirs. If Yin Dao had a good family background, he could buy all kinds of elixirs for him and use them to nourish his injuries. Maybe he could recover from his injuries and advance his martial arts to the next level. Unfortunately, the silver knife had nothing, not even a single spirit medicine. It was basically impossible for him to heal his injuries and advance his martial arts to the next level. Just when Celestial Lingzi was lost in his thoughts, Yin Dao suddenly held his head and coughed violently. The coughing sound was so intense that he couldn't even stand steadily and directly fell to the ground. A few of Yin Dao's ribs were broken. Under this fall, he immediately screamed in pain, and large beads of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. This pain caused him to cough violently, and during the coughing, he vomited from time to time. Looking at Yin Dao's miserable appearance, Water Spirit's heart was very uncomfortable. Although she didn't lie to him, she still felt that she owed him. Seeing Yin Dao's appearance, Li Shan also clenched his teeth, and an inexplicable feeling rose in his heart. Among these people, other than the people from Kikiaman, the youngest was Wu Ying. Although Wu Ying was the youngest, he was still more than 40 years old. All of these people were once young and also once struggled. In the process of struggling, they also encountered many setbacks. Everyone had their difficulties, and everyone's success wasn't easy. Looking at Silver Knife, who was coughing in pain, everyone felt pity for him. This young man was like them in the past, daring to do anything for their dreams. It was because of this that they were able to succeed. Although they couldn't be like some people who were admired by others, they were already satisfied because such people were definitely favored by the heavens, and they couldn't compare. No matter how much effort they put in, they still couldn't compare. Looking at this young man, Yin Dao, walking down their old path, everyone's heart was filled with emotions. Yin Dao's coughing continued for a long time, but still didn't stop. Seeing this, Li Shan couldn't bear it and slowly took a step forward to Shui Spirit's side and whispered, "Shui Spirit, from what I see, Yin Dao is so pitiful. Why don't you just give him the equipment? Consider it a good deed." Hearing Li Mingshan's question, Water Spirit bitterly smiled. "Silver Blade wants a piece of level 25 equipment, but where am I supposed to give him one? What can I do? It's not that I don't want to give him one, but that I really don't have one." What Shui Spirit said this time was absolutely true. Seeing Yin Dao's miserable appearance, if Shui Spirit really did have a level 25 equipment, she might really give it to him. Unfortunately, Shui Spirit didn't have it. How could everyone have such a precious level 25 equipment? Even if he was a consecrated of the Tiangongmen, it was impossible for him to have a level 25 equipment. Hearing Shui Spirit's answer, Li Shan secretly sighed. He was also very clear that what Shui Spirit said might be true. Level 25 equipment, even the godly sword sex patriarch didn't have it, so how could Shui Spirit have it? After a long while, Shadowless suddenly walked up to the two of them and said in a low voice, "You two, how about I say something? You know how valuable level 25 equipment is. In my opinion, it's better not to think about it. Level 20 equipment is more reliable. What do you think?" Hearing Shadowless's words, Li Shan clenched his teeth and thought for a moment before nodding. "Okay, I agree." Hearing Li Shan's words, Shui Spirit bitterly smiled and shook her head. Seeing this, Li Shan suddenly became angry. "Shui Spirit, I've already lowered the requirement to level 20 equipment, you still don't agree?" Shui Spirit shook her head. "What's the use of lowering the requirement to level 20 equipment?" Speaking up to here, Shui Spirit paused for a moment before continuing, "Li Shan, even if I agree, what's the use?" Speaking up to here, Shui Spirit signaled to Yin Dao, who was violently coughing with her eyes before continuing, "Li Shan, as long as you can make him agree, I'll agree." After hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Li Mingshan immediately reacted. He turned his head to look at Yin Dao, and the pity in his heart burst out again. Li Shan carefully thought for a moment before slowly nodding. "Yin Dao is a disciple of our godly sword sect. I think my words should be useful." After hearing Li Shan's words, Shui Lingzi sighed and slowly said, Li Shan, I hope your words really work." Chapter 533. After hearing Water Spirit's words, Li Shan silently nodded and turned around to walk towards Yin Dao. When he got close to Yin Dao, Li Shan slowly squatted down and looked at the coughing Yin Dao. He suddenly sighed, "Yin Dao, why don't you lower your condition a bit?" Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao's coughs became louder once again. He barely squeezed out a word before he couldn't continue, because the violent coughs had forced him to stop talking. No, although Yin Dao didn't finish his words, Li Shan already understood that Yin Dao didn't agree. Although he couldn't say anything else, He had already expressed what he wanted to express. Looking at the coughing Yin Dao, Li Shan suddenly sighed. Yin Dao, level 25 equipment, it's possible that water spirit doesn't have it. Even if you want to ask him for it, he can't give it to you. Yin Dao, who was coughing violently, stared at Li Shan after hearing his words. He wanted to say something, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't finish his sentence. No, seeing that Yin Dao was still stubborn, Li Shan was a bit annoyed and said in a low voice, Yin Dao, why are you so stupid? Water spirit doesn't have level 25 equipment, how can he give it to you? You should give up on your condition. After hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao fiercely shouted, No, cough, but he only managed to say one sentence before he was drowned out by coughing again. Seeing that Yin Dao was so stubborn and that even the words of the godly sword sect's protector didn't work, Li Shan suddenly became angry and said coldly, Yin Dao, I am the protector of the godly sword sect, and you are a disciple of the godly sword sect. You must listen to me. I now announce that this matter is decided. After saying this, Li Shan wanted to stand up, but who knew that Yin Dao, who was coughing violently, suddenly reached out and grabbed Li Shan, not letting go no matter what. When Li Shan was caught by Yin Dao, his anger suddenly burst out. He reached out to grab Yin Dao's hand and was about to throw it away. However, when he raised his head and saw Yin Dao's eyes, he was shocked. Li Mingshan had dominated the South County for many years and had killed many people. However, none of them had the same gaze as Yin Dao. Yin Dao stared at Li Shan with his venomous eyes. Although he couldn't say anything, his venomous eyes had already expressed his intention. When Li Shan saw the look in Yin Dao's eyes, he knew that if he didn't listen to Yin Dao would be his nightmare for the rest of his life. If it was someone else, Li Mingshan might just laugh it off and not take it seriously. But this lunatic Yin Dao, he really believed it. Even though Li Shan's martial arts were much higher than Yin Dao's at this moment, he felt a chill in his heart. Looking at Yin Dao's chilling gaze, Li Mingshan's pity for him also vanished like smoke in thin air under the gaze of Yin Dao. At this moment, Li Shan was thinking about how to get rid of this lunatic. Li Shan took a deep breath and slowly broke free from Yin Dao's hand. He retreated to the side and lowered his head. At this moment, Li Shan only hoped that he didn't say those words. Seeing Li Shan's silence, Shui Lingzi knew that his persuasion plan had failed. However, she didn't care because she already knew that this would be the result. Seeing that Li Shan didn't speak, Shadowless became anxious and quickly asked, Li Shan, what's going on? How was your persuasion? Li Shan shook his head with a bitter smile. He turned to look at Shadowless and was about to speak when his heart suddenly moved. As the protector of the godly sword sect, he naturally couldn't kill his own disciple in front of so many people. But Shadowless was different. Shadowless's temper wasn't very good. If he went forward to persuade Yin Dao, he might just slap Yin Dao in a fit of anger. That might not be a bad thing. Thinking of this, Li Shan patted Shadowless's shoulder and said with a bitter smile, Brother Shadowless, I don't know how to talk. Even if I wanted to persuade him, I don't know where to start. This matter really made you laugh. Hearing Li Shan's answer, Shadowless frowned. Li Shan, you're saying that Yin Dao won't listen to you? Li Mingchuan nodded gloomily. My words don't work. Speaking of this, Li Shan paused for a moment before continuing, If Brother Shadowless is confident, you can give it a try. Hearing Li Shan's words, Shadowless was stunned. After a while, he reacted and asked, Li Shan, do you want me to persuade Yin Dao? Li Shan nodded with a smile. That's what I'm thinking. Brother Shadowless, do you want to go? Shadowless subconsciously turned his head to look at Yin Dao. After thinking for a while, he nodded. I can give it a try, but I can't guarantee that I'll succeed. Hearing this, Li Shan was overjoyed. He quickly smiled and said, If that's the case, Then I'll have to trouble Brother Shadowless. Shadowless nodded and turned to walk towards Dao. When he arrived in front of Dao, Shadowless followed Li Shan's example and knelt down. Looking at Dao, who was coughing non-stop, Shadowless spoke slowly. Dao, how's your injury? Do you feel better now? Dao was still coughing, but it wasn't as bad as before. When he heard Shadowless's question, he nodded while coughing, indicating that he was fine. Shadowless smiled and said, Dao, you heard what everyone said just now. What do you want? Hearing Shadowless's question, Dao took a deep breath and barely suppressed his coughing. Then, he said in a soft voice, I only want that level 25 equipment. Although it was just a simple sentence, it still caused Dao to cough violently again. Hearing this, Shadowless smiled. Dao, that's impossible. You should know about Water Spirit. If he had a way to take out that level 25 equipment, he would have done it already. Why would he rather not complete this mission than take out that level 25 equipment? Dao shook his head. I don't care, I only want that level 25 equipment. Shadowless continued patiently. Dao, do you know what will happen if Water Spirit doesn't complete this mission? After asking this, Shadowless didn't wait for Dao to reply and continued. If Water Spirit doesn't complete this mission and let Kikiaman's people escape, I'm sure that when Water Spirit returns, he will be heavily punished. Chapter 534. Shadowless continued. Dao, since Water Spirit will be heavily punished if he can't complete the mission, I think he'll do whatever he can to complete it. Shadowless paused for a bit before continuing, but as you can see, Water Spirit would rather give up on this mission than give you that level 25 equipment. So I think that he really doesn't have a way to fulfill your conditions. After saying this, Shadowless looked at Dao with a smile. Dao, do you understand what I mean? Dao shook his head. I don't care what you mean, I just want my level 25 equipment. Hearing Dao's words, Shui Lingzi took a deep breath, suppressing her emotions that were about to explode, and slowly said, Dao, I already said that if Water Spirit could fulfill your condition, he would have already done it. How could this be? Dao turned to look at Shadowless with a deep frown. Are you with Water Spirit? Shadowless shook his head. No, I'm not with Water Spirit and I'm not speaking for him. I'm just telling you the truth so you can change that impossible condition. After hearing Shadowless's answer, Silver Knife suddenly sneered and said, Since you're not Water Spirit's accomplice, then please don't talk nonsense here. I only want my level 25 equipment, I don't care about anything else. Shadowless' hands began to tremble. He had been famous for so many years and no one had ever talked to him like this. Shadowless clenched his teeth and clenched his hands into fists. He stared at Dao's head as a voice kept echoing in his mind. Hurry up and teach this reckless guy a lesson. Don't let him know that Shadowless is not to be messed with. Dao had already seen Shadowless's strange state, but he didn't care and sneered. Shadowless, if you want to hit me, then go ahead. Dao's voice suddenly turned cold. But I have to warn you, before you hit me, think about whether or not you have level 25 equipment. Shut up. As soon as Silver Knife finished speaking, Shadowless roared. He raised his fists and was about to smash Silver Knife's head. Come back. Although his voice wasn't loud, it hit Shadowless's nervous nerves. He suddenly relaxed and realized that he couldn't make a move at this time. Water Spirit was a good example. If he were to make a move now, he would definitely get into some trouble. Shadowless wanted to pull back his fist, but he was angry just now. How could he pull back just like that? Seeing that his fist was about to hit the Silver Knife, Shadowless suddenly growled and used all his strength to move his shoulder to the side. His fist brushed past the Silver Knife. Because Shadowless used too much force, his body slanted and brushed past the Silver Knife. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. It was thanks to his good horse stance that he didn't make a fool of himself. Shadowless took a deep breath and slowly turned his head. Coincidentally, Silver Knife also turned his head to look at him. Shadowless wanted to say a few words to scare Silver Saber, but he didn't expect Silver Saber to sneer and say loudly, "Shadowless, if you don't dare to fight, then don't try in front of me. Don't embarrass yourself." Hearing Silver Saber's words, the anger that Shadowless had just calmed down burst out again. Shadowless fiercely stared at Silver Saber and shouted, "Silver Saber, if I didn't pull back in time, I'm afraid you would have been killed by me. Do you still have time to talk nonsense here?" Silver Saber heard this and was about to speak, but he felt his throat itch and coughed again. After a while, Silver Saber's throat felt better and he coldly said, "Shadowless, don't say those nice words. If you have the ability, then fight. I can't run away from here. I think you're just a useless person. I'm standing here and you don't even dare to fight." Hearing Silver Saber's words, not only did Shadowless fly into a rage, even Li Shan couldn't help but frown. Li Shan never thought that the godly Saber sect would have such a disciple. Shadowless was quite famous in the South region. Almost no one could compare to his Qin Gong. In addition to the power behind him, he could be considered a tyrant. He could be considered a person with a lot of weight. But now, he was furious at his own disciple, but there was nothing he could do. Shadowless suddenly turned his head to look at Li Shan and angrily said, "Li Shan, you also heard what your Godly Knife Martial School's disciple said. I hope you remember that he started this first. Don't blame me for being ruthless." Hearing Shadowless's words, Li Shan was stunned for a moment. After he reacted, he quickly walked to Shadowless and whispered, "Brother Shadowless, are you really going to fight?" Shadowless sneered, "Li Shan, could it be that you're not willing to?" Li Shan shook his head. "I remember you telling me not to be angry, and to be calm. But how did you become so impatient? You should know that if you kill Silver Saber, then the one who benefits will be Shui Lingzi." Hearing Li Shan's words, Shadowless suddenly understood. He quickly turned his head to look at Shui Lingzi and saw that she was staring at him. At this moment, Silver Saber suddenly shouted, "Lord Protector, he won't dare to do anything to me. If he dared to hit me, he would have already done so. We wouldn't have waited until now." Hearing Silver Saber's words, Shadowless's anger surged again. He turned his head and was about to recklessly charge at Silver Saber. Li Shan saw that the situation wasn't good. He quickly grabbed Shadowless and whispered, "Brother Shadowless, he's just a madman. Why do you have to be like him? Calm down." Hearing Li Shan's words, Shadowless let out a sigh. He was definitely regretting it. Why did he have to go up and talk to Silver Saber? In the end, he ended up like this. He had lost all his face. However, Li Shan was right. Silver Saber was a madman. If he fought with a madman, then wouldn't he also become a madman? Seeing the anger on Shadowless's face gradually dissipate, Li Shan felt a little relieved. Li Shan didn't want anyone to kill Silver Saber. No one. This was because Silver Saber had a great use. That level 25 equipment needed Silver Saber's stubbornness to get it. How could Li Shan let go of such a good opportunity? Moreover, even if he couldn't get that level 25 equipment, even if he could get that level 20 equipment, it was still very good. So no matter what Silver Saber did, Li Shan would protect him. This was because protecting the silver dagger was equivalent to protecting the level 25 equipment. Chapter 535. Water Spirit had been watching the conversation between Shadowless and Silver Knife. She was hoping that Shadowless and Silver Knife's discussion would break down. The more Shadowless and Silver Saber talked, the better. It would be best if the two of them fought in the end. Of course, if Shadowless could take care of Silver Saber, then that would be Water Spirit's dream. Unfortunately, Water Spirit was disappointed. She had clearly seen Shadowless killing intent but was stopped by Li Mingshan. Water Spirit naturally knew why Li Mingshan had stopped Shadowless. He wanted to protect Silver Knife so that he could continue to ask for the level 25 equipment from her. Seeing that Shadowless had lost his killing intent from Li Mingshan, Water Spirit became anxious and shouted, "Silver Knife, how dare you talk to Shadowless like that? Do you know who Shadowless is? Even your master has to be respectful when he sees Shadowless. Hurry up and apologize to Shadowless." Hearing Water Spirit's words, Silver Knife sneered, "I don't care if he's Shadowless or Shadow. As long as he ruins my plans, I won't let him go." Hearing Water Spirit's words, Li Mingshan knew that things weren't going well. He wanted to stop Shadowless, but it was too late. Silver Knife had already said what Li Mingshan didn't want to hear the most. Li Mingshan sighed and turned to look at Shadowless. Shadowless's eyes flashed with killing intent again. Li Mingshan knew that things weren't going well. He quickly grabbed Shadowless and whispered, "Brother Shadowless, don't be tricked by Water Spirit. He wants to use you." Shadowless suddenly woke up and slowly turned to look at Water Spirit. Water Spirit saw Shadowless look over and quickly said with a smile, "Brother Shadowless, this Silver Knife doesn't know what's good for him. He dares to talk nonsense to Brother Shadowless. He really doesn't know how to be polite." Shadowless took a deep breath and slowly said, "Water Spirit, you win." After saying this, Shadowless walked to the side. Shadowless knew that if he stayed by Silver Knife's side any longer, he might really kill him. In order to prevent Water Spirit from using him, Shadowless decided to hide far away and no longer care about what happened here. Seeing Shadowless leave, Li Shan sneered and turned to look at Shui Ling before also leaving. Seeing this scene, Shui Lingzi sighed in her heart. Such a good opportunity, but she couldn't resolve this matter perfectly. Thinking of this, Shui Lingzi suddenly turned to Wu Kadi and said with a smile, "Wu Kadi, your ability to persuade people should be very good. I think it would be better for you to persuade Yin Dao to lower his conditions so that we can reach an agreement as soon as possible." After listening to Water Spirit's words, Wu Kadi shook his head and said, "I can't do it. You, Water Spirit, have a way with words. You'll definitely be able to get twice the result with half the effort." Speaking up to here, Wu Kadi's tone paused, then he cupped his fists toward Shui Lingzi and continued, "I wish Shui Lingzi success." Seeing that Wu Kadi wasn't going to be fooled, Shui Lingzi didn't care as he still had a way to deal with Yin Dao. Water Spirit slowly walked in front of Yin Dao and said in a low voice, "Yin Dao, do you remember what I just said to you?" Yin Dao sneered, "I don't remember." Shui Lingzi smiled, "It doesn't matter if you don't remember, I can tell you." Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing, "I just said that even if you become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect leader, with your martial arts aptitude, you won't be able to get an important position. In other words, you won't be able to get the nourishment of the sect's elixirs to improve your martial arts like the other disciples." Yin Dao turned to look at Shui Lingzi and slowly said, "Shui Lingzi, don't talk nonsense. Just now, Lord Protector said very clearly that I will definitely be able to get the nourishment of the Godly Knife sect's elixirs to improve my martial arts." Shui Lingzi shook her head, "Yin Dao, you're too naive. Just like the story I just told you, the story of two blades. If you were the Peerless Blade, then you might be able to get an important position from the Godly Knife sect's sect leader and be given a lot of elixirs to improve your martial art. But unfortunately, you're just an ordinary blade. You're even worse than an ordinary blade because you're seriously injured right now. Even if you heal your injuries, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for you to make any big progress in your martial arts. So, you're just an ordinary blade and won't be able to get the love of the Godly Knife sect's sect leader. Do you understand now?" Hearing Shui Lingzi compare him to an ordinary blade, Yin Dao was a little angry. He turned to look at Shui Lingzi and sternly shouted, Whether or not the Godly Knife sect leader will give me elixirs is our Godly Knife sect's matter. It has nothing to do with you. Please don't talk about these things anymore. Shui Lingzi sighed. Yin Dao, why are you doing this? You're just running away. You know what I'm saying is true, but you don't want to believe it. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing. Yin Dao, this is life. You have to face reality and find a solution in reality. With your martial arts talent, even if you join the Godly Knife sect leader with your level 25 equipment, you won't be able to get an important position. With your martial arts talent, if you don't have a large amount of elixirs, you won't be able to make any progress in your martial arts. So, you should just give up. After hearing Shui Lingzi's words, the thing that Yin Dao didn't want to think about the most was finally exposed by Shui Lingzi. Yin Dao began to cough violently. Every time he coughed, the vibration caused by his coughing made his broken ribs hurt. But at this moment, Yin Dao felt that this pain wasn't enough. Yin Dao wanted to use this pain to forget the things that he wanted to forget. Amidst the violent coughing and the intense pain, Yin Dao's mind kept recalling Shui Lingzi's words. With your martial arts talent, even if you join the Godly Knife sect leader, you won't be able to get an important position. Thinking of this, Yin Dao only felt a splitting headache. In comparison, the pain from his ribs was almost negligible. Yin Dao's face was filled with pain as he kept coughing violently. His body gradually went limp on the ground, constantly twisting due to the pain. Seeing Yin Dao's painful appearance, Shui Lingzi's heart couldn't bear to see him like this. Yin Dao was just a young man who pursued progress. For his bright future, he wasn't afraid of any difficulties, even sacrificing himself. If Yin Dao's drive was used in other areas, Shui Lingzi could protect him, and he would definitely be able to make a name for himself. Unfortunately, Yin Dao used the wrong direction. He wanted her to give him a level 25 equipment, and then use this level 25 equipment to join the Godly Knife sect leader and achieve his dream. This time, in Yin Dao's eyes, was his best opportunity. If his luck was good, he would be able to become the Godly Knife sect leader and achieve his lifelong dream. Chapter 536. Looking at the unwavering Yin Dao who firmly believed in his goal, Shui Lingzi could only sigh and have nothing to say. Although Shui Lingzi had nothing to say, she had to say it because it was related to whether or not he could complete this mission. Thinking of this, Shui Lingzi sighed in her heart and slowly said, Yin Dao, listen to me. Even if you join the Godly Knife sect, you won't have any future. There's no meaning to it. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing. Maybe because of the fierce competition, your situation will be even more dangerous than it is now. Shui Lingzi's words were definitely not false. Those who could join the Godly Knife sect were all people with extremely high martial talent. Not only were their martial talent high, but their minds were also stronger than ordinary people. Everyone who joined the Godly Knife sect master dreamed of becoming the next sect master of the Godly Knife sect. Driven by this mentality, there would definitely be a very intense battle. This kind of battle was not limited to martial arts, but also other aspects. For example, the Godly Knife sect master had a pill that could increase one's strength, but he had too many disciples, so who should he give it to? This was a big problem. The competition was too fierce. Everyone wanted it, and everyone wanted it. Everyone wanted it, and everyone wanted it. This created even more intense competition. Yin Dao was very persistent. In this kind of competition, other than being schemed against, his persistence was useless. Although Yin Dao was a madman, it was only because of that level 25 equipment that made him crazy. He could still remember his past memories, which could prove what Shui Lingzi said was true. Not to mention the Godly Knife sect master's disciples, even the ordinary disciples had a lot of disputes. Just like the analogy just now, the analogy of a knife. Even if it was an ordinary knife, as long as it looked good, these ordinary disciples would still fight for it. This was competition. Yin Dao had never won in this kind of competition. Maybe it was because he disdained to compete, or maybe he really couldn't compete with others. Looking at Yin Dao's somewhat dim eyes, Li Mingshan knew that this hateful madman was somewhat moved. Helplessly, Li Mingshan could only step forward and smile at Yin Dao. Yin Dao, don't listen to Shui Lingzi's nonsense. The Godly Knife Sect Master has always been fair and just. He treats every disciple equally. Even if he has a treasure, he will equally distribute it to every disciple so that they can progress together and become the pillars of the Godly Knife Sect. Yin Dao blankly raised his head. Lord Protector, is what you said true? Li Shan smiled. Yin Dao, why would I lie to you? You also know that the Godly Knife Sect's Lord's disciples are all highly skilled in martial arts. It's all because the Godly Knife Sect's Lord has always been fair to his disciples and will never favor any one of them. Therefore, Yin Dao, you can rest assured that the situation you mentioned will not happen. Shui Lingzi sneered. Yin Dao, even now, do you still believe his lies? Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi paused for a moment before continuing. Yin Dao, I can clearly tell you that this is not a matter of favoritism. It is the responsibility of the Godly Knife Sect Master to select the most outstanding disciple to inherit the position of Godly Knife Sect Master. Therefore, the Sect Master of the Godly Knife Sect would definitely select 2 to 3 disciples from all the disciples, and then nurture them. In the end, he would choose one of these disciples to be his successor. As for the rest of the disciples, I'm afraid they won't be so lucky. Even if they get one treasure, it will only be the leftovers of the few important disciples. There won't be too many treasures. Speaking up to here, Shui Lingzi sighed. The real treasures are those that can increase a person's strength. They are quite valuable. It can even be said that their value is not lower than level 20 equipment. Some of them are even higher. Yin Dao, think about it. With your mediocre talent, do you think you can get such a valuable thing? This time, without waiting for Yin Dao to answer, Li Shan said, Why not? Even if your talent is mediocre, you are still a disciple of the Godly Knife Sect Master. Why can't you get those elixirs? Speaking up to here, Li Shan paused and turned to look at Yin Dao before continuing. Those elixirs are mainly given to the disciples by the Godly Knife Sect Master. Yin Dao, I believe in you. If you perform well, you will definitely get those elixirs. This time, Shui Lingzi didn't wait for him to answer and said, Li Shan, then tell me. Since you are a protector of the Godly Knife Sect, how many elixirs have you gotten? Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Li Shan's face changed. He was a bit annoyed. This was a pain in his heart. Ever since he joined the Godly Knife Sect, he didn't get many elixirs. But these words couldn't be said in front of Yin Dao. He could only think about it in his heart. Hearing Shui Lingzi's question, Li Shan smiled and said, I'm ashamed to say that the Godly Knife Sect Master gave me so many elixirs. I feel a bit guilty. Hearing Li Shan's words, Shui Lingzi sneered in her heart. Guilty? Shui Lingzi didn't believe that Li Shan would feel guilty. Shui Lingzi was also an experienced person. She didn't believe that the Godly Knife Sect Master would give Li Shan many elixirs. Not to mention others, even Shui Lingzi herself was a very obvious example. After being in the Tiangongmen for so many years, with Shui Lingzi's identity, she should have at least a few high-level equipment. However, the fact was that the high-level equipment of the Tiangongmen were all in the warehouse. Shui Lingzi's personal home only had 2 or 3 pieces of equipment. Even these 2 pieces of equipment were given to him because Shui Lingzi had made a great contribution. Therefore, when Li Shan said that the Godly Knife Sect Master gave him a lot of elixirs, Shui Lingzi didn't believe him. Elixirs weren't cabbages that could be found everywhere. Every elixir was quite precious, and it was hard to say how much one had to pay to obtain them. This kind of treasure was something that even the godly knife sect master wouldn't be willing to use, let alone a little Li Shan Shan. Hearing Li Shan Shan's answer, Shui Lingzi sneered, Li Shan Shan, then tell me, what elixirs did the godly knife sect master give you? Hearing Shui Lingzi's question, Li Shan Shan's face suddenly changed. Of course, it was because he was angry, but more of it was because he was angry. There were indeed many elixirs in the godly knife sect's warehouse, but which one of them belonged to him? Thinking of this, Li Shan Shan angrily said, Shui Lingzi, what elixirs did the godly knife sect master give me? Do I have an obligation to tell you? Shui Lingzi, don't you think this is ridiculous? Chapter 537. Shui Lingzi shook her head slightly. Li Shan Shan, since you said that you were given a lot of elixirs, then tell us, what elixirs have you used to make us envious? Li Shan Shan was angered by Shui Lingzi's words, but he had no way to refute and could only slowly speak. Shui Lingzi, I don't need to talk to you about this. Hearing Li Shan Shan's answer, Shui Lingzi didn't probe further and turned to look at Yin Dao with a smile. Yin Dao, I'll tell you the truth, if you want to advance by leaps and bounds in martial arts and become a master of martial arts, unless you have a lot of elixirs to nourish you, otherwise, with your martial arts aptitude, it is absolutely impossible. Yin Dao raised his head to look at Shui Lingzi and angrily said, Shui Lingzi, are you looking down on me? Shui Lingzi shook her head. No, I just want to tell you the truth, if you want to stand out in martial arts, it is basically impossible. After Shui Lingzi finished speaking, she turned her head to look at Yin Dao, secretly proud of herself. At this moment, Yin Dao's face was full of pain. It seemed that he had figured out that what Shui Lingzi said was true. Even if he joined the godly knife sect, without a lot of elixirs to support him, it was absolutely impossible to stand out. And if he wanted the support of the godly knife sect's sect master, he must have extraordinary talent. Unfortunately, Yin Dao didn't have that. His martial arts aptitude was only mediocre. Thinking of this fact, Yin Dao painfully shed tears. Suddenly, he looked up to the sky and shouted, No, this is not the truth, I don't want this truth, I want to succeed, I want to stand out, I want to practice martial arts, I want to be admired by everyone. Listening to Yin Dao's incoherent shout, everyone's heart once again rose a sense of pity. Yin Dao's shout at this time, wasn't it also the shout in their hearts when they were young? When they were young, they also wanted to succeed, they also wanted to stand out, but none of them shouted out like Yin Dao, and none of them pursued without scruples like Yin Dao. After Silver Knife looked up at the sky for a while, he coughed violently again. Following this violent coughing, Silver Knife could no longer stand steadily and slowly fell to the ground. Although everyone pitied Yin Dao, no one went to help him. Everyone knew that Yin Dao had already gone crazy. If anyone went to help him now, they might get into trouble. Yin Dao lay on the ground and coughed for a long time. After coughing out 2 mouthfuls of blood, he finally calmed down. He silently lay on the ground and looked up at the night sky, mumbling to himself. Why is it like this? I've already worked so hard, but why can't I succeed? Could it be that my life is already destined to be mediocre and mediocre? Cough, cough. After a series of violent coughs, Yin Dao looked up to the sky and shouted again, I don't want to accept this. I really don't want to accept this. There are so many successful people in the world. Why am I not one of them? Seeing that Yin Dao was shouting madly, no one said anything. They all stood far away and silently watched. Yin Dao was so heavily injured, but he didn't shed a single tear. But now tears were streaming down his face. At this moment, just as Yin Dao's eyes dimmed, Li Shan Shan suddenly took a step forward and said in a low voice, Yin Dao, don't give up. As long as you work hard, you will definitely succeed. Yin Dao turned his head and looked at Li Shan. He suddenly laughed wildly. You lied to me. You've been lying to me all this time. Hearing this, Li Shan's face suddenly changed. But it only lasted for a moment before it returned to normal. Yin Dao, don't forget that there is still a level 25 equipment waiting for you at Water Spirit's place. Speaking up to here, Li Shan's tone paused. He took a step towards Yin Dao and continued, if you have this level 25 equipment, even if you don't want to become a disciple of the Godly Knife sect, you can use this equipment to exchange for a type of elixir. Your martial arts talent is indeed very poor, but with the elixir you exchange for, won't you be able to increase your strength? Isn't that good? Hearing Li Shan's words, Yin Dao's eyes lit up again as he muttered to himself. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Level 25 equipment is so precious. I believe that I can also exchange it for an extremely precious elixir. As long as I can eat this elixir, my strength will increase greatly. Ha ha. After saying those words, Yin Dao once again faced the sky and madly laughed. However, this time around, his laughter was one of joy, and not despair like the laughter from before. Looking at Silver Saber, who was laughing madly at the sky, everyone looked at each other and sighed in their hearts. Yin Dao laughed for a while, and then coughed violently before slowly getting up, turning to Shui Lingzi and saying with a smile, Water Spirit, I've thought it through. As long as I take the level 25 equipment you gave me and exchange it for an elixir, then I can immediately change this situation. Don't you think so, Water Spirit? Hearing Yin Dao's words, Water Spirit's expression didn't change. She only shook her head and said with a cold smile, Yin Dao, even if you have the equipment, where are you going to exchange it for an elixir? Hearing this, Yin Dao paused for a moment. I can go to the Godly Sword sect to exchange it. I believe that the sect master of the Godly Sword sect will agree to exchange it with me. Water Spirit shook her head. Yin Dao, I don't think that will work. When the disciples of the Godly Sword sect go out on official business, anything they obtain will belong to the Godly Sword sect. Yin Dao, I don't know if what I said is right or not. Hearing Water Spirit's words, Yin Dao laughed. As long as I offer this equipment, they will reward me with an elixir. Wouldn't that be great? Water Spirit shook her head again. There are many types of elixirs. Some can increase physique, some can increase strength, and some can detoxify. In short, there are many types of elixirs. Which one do you want to exchange for? Hearing this, Yin Dao sneered. Of course I want to exchange it for an elixir that can increase strength. Hearing Yin Dao's answer, Water Spirit nodded and continued, You want to exchange for a pill that can increase your cultivation, but you should know that there are many types of pills that can increase one's cultivation. Some can only increase one's cultivation by a small amount, while others can increase one's cultivation by a large amount. There are even some pills that can directly increase a person's cultivation by a whole level. What kind of pill do you think you should exchange for? Yin Dao thought for a moment and said with some uncertainty, I should be able to exchange it for an elixir that can increase a person's realm. Speaking up to here, Yin Dao paused for a moment before continuing, After all, level 25 equipment is quite precious. Exchanging it for an elixir shouldn't be a problem. Hearing this, Water Spirit nodded. No problem, absolutely no problem. With level 25 equipment, you can exchange it for a very good elixir. Chapter 538. Hearing Water Spirit's answer, Yin Dao was relieved. Water Spirit, since it's like this, then hurry up and give me the level 25 equipment. I'll go and exchange it for an elixir to increase my strength. Water Spirit nodded. Okay, I can give you a level 25 equipment. As soon as Water Spirit's voice fell, the surrounding people gasped. After Li Mingshan heard this, he sucked in 2 breaths of cold air, looking at Shui Lingzi with disbelief. Could it be this matter was settled just like this? The level 25 equipment of his dreams was in his hands, just like this? Although the equipment wasn't in Li Mingshan's hands yet, Li Mingshan believed that the equipment that Water Spirit gave to Yin Dao would soon be transferred to him. That level 25 equipment was something that even the Godly Knife sect master didn't have. When Li Shan thought that he was going to have level 25 equipment, he suddenly felt dizzy. All of this felt like a dream. Thinking about how he could wear that level 25 equipment and roam the South County, he couldn't help but be excited. Thinking about how precious the level 25 equipment was, Li Shan fiercely pinched himself. He wanted to prove that he wasn't dreaming. Pain. It really hurt. This wasn't a dream, all of this was real. The pain made Li Shan wake up in an instant. He suddenly remembered, if he really wore that level 25 equipment, would it really be suitable? His martial arts skills were only considered average in the South County. It was not too high. If he wore that equipment, would he really be safe? Thinking about this, Li Shan subconsciously glanced at Wu Kedi and Shadowless, only to find that their eyes were filled with jealousy. Not only that, Li Mingshan also saw something else in their eyes. Seeing this kind of gaze, Li Shan's heart went cold and his mind became clearer. Although Li Shan was excited, he wasn't crazy. He had his own thoughts and could infer what was best for him. If he really wore that level 25 equipment, what would the consequences be? Looking at Wu Kedi and Shadowless's eyes, Li Mingshan understood. If he really wore that level 25 equipment, he was afraid that not only would it not bring him any safety, but it would also attract countless troubles. There were too many people who wanted to get their hands on level 25 equipment. Furthermore, his martial arts weren't top-notch. He was only a mid-tier expert. A target like him was the best target for those experts to snatch equipment from. Thinking of this, Li Shan once again sucked in a breath of cold air, and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. If he really wore that level 25 equipment, it would definitely attract countless experts to fight over it. At that time, would he be able to keep this level 25 equipment? No, by that time, it would no longer be about the equipment. It would be about whether or not he could save his life. Thinking of this, Li Shan wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and began to hesitate. If he obtained that level 25 equipment, should he wear it or not? Li Shan turned his head and looked at Silver Knife. Suddenly, he had an idea. If he offered this level 25 equipment to the Godly Knife Guild Master, would he accept him as a disciple? Thinking of this possibility, Li Shan's heart began to become lively. If he could become the Godly Knife Guild Master's disciple, that would be a great thing. Although he was a bit old, Li Shan believed that the Godly Knife sect master wouldn't mind his age for the sake of the level 25 equipment. Thinking of this, Li Shan's thoughts became clear. If he really became the Godly Knife Guild Master's disciple, with his martial arts talent, he should be able to quickly stand out among the numerous disciples of the Godly Knife Guild Master. Thinking of this, Li Shan became excited. If he could stand out among the numerous disciples of the Godly Knife Guild Master, then wouldn't that mean that he would also have the opportunity to become the Godly Knife Guild Master? Thinking of this, Li Shan made up his mind. As long as he obtained that level 25 equipment, he would immediately offer it to the Godly Knife Guild Master and ask him to accept him as a disciple. Thinking of this, Li Shan raised his head and looked at Water Spirit. He loudly asked, "Water Spirit, are you serious?" After Li Shan said this, he was shocked. When did his voice become so hoarse? Hearing Li Shan's question, Water Spirit nodded. "Of course it's true. Why would I lie to you?" Hearing Water Spirit's answer for the second time, Shadowless's eyes were about to spit fire from jealousy. Giving a piece of level 25 equipment to a nobody? Wasn't this a bit too much? Silver Blade was only an insignificant character. Shadowless never thought that Water Spirit would actually agree to Silver Blade's condition. From Shadowless's point of view, Water Spirit agreeing to give Silver Blade a level 20 equipment was already a miracle for Silver Blade. But Shadowless never thought that Water Spirit would actually agree, and agree so easily. Looking at Li Shan's face full of joy, Shadowless was so jealous that he almost couldn't breathe. Shadowless was very clear that Silver Blade was just a madman. Even if he obtained the equipment, he definitely wouldn't be able to get it. Shadowless was sure that the person who would actually get the equipment would be the smiling Li Shan. On the side, Wu Kudi was also very angry. Although Silver Blade's injuries weren't light, his brother's injuries weren't light either. If he was as shameless as Silver Knife, would he also get a piece of level 25 equipment? Looking at the calm Water Spirit, Wu Kudi wanted to open his mouth several times, but no words came out. The matter just now was already over. No one would bring it up again. In other words, his brother's injuries were in vain. Silver Blade, who hadn't spoken until now, suddenly said, "Water Spirit, since you've already agreed to my condition, then hurry up and fulfill it." Hearing Silver Blade's question, Water Spirit shook her head. "Not now." Hearing Water Spirit's answer, Silver Blade angrily said, "Water Spirit, why not? You clearly agreed just now." Speaking up to hear, Silver Blade paused for a moment before coldly saying, "Water Spirit, are you going back on your word?" Hearing this, Water Spirit hurriedly waved her hand and proudly said, "Silver Blade, when have I, Water Spirit, ever gone back on my words? Don't worry, as long as I promise you, I will definitely keep it." Hearing Water Spirit's words, Li Mingshui, who had been silent all this time, suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Water Spirit, we don't believe in your promise. Unless you can take out level 25 equipment right now, if you really go back on your word, then wouldn't we be in trouble?" Hearing Li Mingshui's words, Water Spirit shook her head. Chapter 539. Water Spirit shook her head. "No problem, as long as Yin Dao is willing, I can write a contract for him at any time." Hearing Water Spirit's words, the crowd once again sucked in a breath of cold air. Yin Dao looked at Water Spirit in disbelief. He almost couldn't believe that these words came from Water Spirit's mouth. Just now, Water Spirit had refused to give him this level 25 equipment in every possible way, unwilling to give him this level 25 equipment. But now, Water Spirit actually agreed so easily. This made Yin Dao a bit suspicious. Yin Dao looked at Water Spirit and asked in confusion, "Water Spirit, why didn't you agree just now?" Water Spirit sighed. "Yin Dao, to be honest, I thought you wouldn't want the level 25 equipment, so I wanted to persuade you." Speaking to hear, Water Spirit paused for a bit before continuing, "But I saw that you really wanted the level 25 equipment to win your future, so I couldn't bear to refuse you. So I decided to help you. Is there a problem with that?" Hearing Water Spirit's words, Yin Dao's eyes suddenly started to tear up. Now that things had reached this point, there was finally a perfect result. He was heavily injured by Fire Spirit and could finally win a chance for his future. As long as he had the level 25 equipment, he could exchange it for a spirit herb from the Godly Sword Sect Master to increase his strength. He believed that with the help of that spirit herb, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds, reaching an unprecedented height. Thinking about how he would shake the South region in the future, Yin Dao's eyes started to tear up even more. Under the surging emotions, Yin Dao violently coughed again. Although the coughing still caused pain in his ribs, Yin Dao's face was full of smiles, as if this kind of pain was a kind of enjoyment. Seeing this scene, Wu Kudi couldn't bear it any longer. He coughed twice to attract Shui Lingzi's attention before taking 2 steps forward. Just as he was about to speak, he felt a little embarrassed, so he coughed twice to cover it up. Only then did he manage to dissipate some of the awkwardness. "Water Spirit, since the matter between you and Yin Dao has come to an end, then the matter of you injuring my big brother should also be settled." Hearing Wu Kadi mention this, the fire spirit on the side suddenly roared, "Wu Kadi, you dare to say that I injured your big brother? Don't forget, your big brother also injured me. Shouldn't you compensate me?" After hearing Fire Spirit's words, Wu Kadi let out an awkward laugh and softly said, "Fire Spirit, that's not the same. You were the one who injured my big brother first, so naturally you have to treat him. I'm not wrong about that, am I?" Fire Spirit heard this and sneered, "Wu Kadi, is your big brother Wu Kutian made of paper? Can he be broken with a single hit?" Hearing Fire Spirit's words, Wu Kadi immediately became angry. "Fire Spirit, what nonsense are you talking about? Your big brother is made of paper." Fire Spirit sneered and said, "Since you're not made of paper, then why did you get injured in one hit and want us to compensate you?" Hearing Fire Spirit's words, Wu Kadi froze for a moment and then said angrily, "Fire Spirit, you were the one who ambushed my big brother first. My big brother was caught off guard and was heavily injured by you. You have to admit this." Fire Spirit nodded. "I was the one who did it, but your big brother wasn't injured. Even if he was injured, it was only a light injury." Speaking up to here, Fire Spirit paused and looked at Wu Kutian in the distance before continuing, "If I'm not wrong, your big brother's injury should have been healed by now." Hearing this, Wu Kadi froze for a moment. Fire Spirit was right. His big brother was slightly injured, but he was fine now. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was the issue of compensation. Thinking up to here, Wu Kadi coughed again and slowly said, "Fire Spirit, you were too ruthless and didn't know how to control your strength. My big brother has already suffered internal injuries." Speaking up to here, Wu Kadi paused for a moment before continuing, "Fire Spirit, do you know what an internal injury is? It's an injury that can't be seen from the outside." Hearing Wu Kadi's twisted logic, Fire Spirit angrily said, "Go to hell, what internal injury? If your big brother is willing to stand here and let me punch him, then I'll admit that he has internal injuries. What do you think?" Hearing this, Wu Kadi's heart suddenly moved as he quickly smiled and said, "Fire Spirit, is this true?" Hearing Wu Kadi say this, Shui Spirit, who had been silent, couldn't help but ask in confusion, "Is what Fire Spirit said true? Are you really willing to let Fire Spirit punch your big brother?" After hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Wu Kadi quickly turned to Wu Kutian and nodded, "No problem." Shui Spirit coldly smiled and asked, "Wu Kadi, aren't you afraid that Fire Spirit really didn't control his strength and really injured your big brother?" Hearing Shui Spirit's words, Wu Kadi hesitated again. He raised his head and looked at Fire Spirit. After a while, he nodded again. "Fire Spirit, if you mean what you say, then go ahead and hit him." When he said this, although Wu Kadi didn't ask his big brother, he was sure that his big brother would agree. If they were heavily injured by Shui Spirit, then they would get a piece of level 25 equipment. That was the legendary level 25 equipment. In the entire South region, there were less than 10 of them. If they could get a piece of level 25 equipment after taking a punch, even Wu Kadi would want to take a punch like that. Moreover, Wu Kadi was sure that even though Shui Spirit spoke fiercely, they wouldn't dare to be ruthless. This wasn't Wu Kadi's confidence, it was the truth. Wu Kadi and his brother weren't the only ones here. Their uncle, Wu Lai, was also here. If Fire Spirit dared to be ruthless and cripple Wu Kutian or directly kill him, then Wu Lai wouldn't just sit by and watch. With Wu Lai's martial arts, it would be too easy for him to deal with Shui Spirit and his brother. It was because of this that Wu Kadi was sure that Fire Spirit wouldn't be ruthless. In other words, this transaction would definitely be a profitable one. Realizing this, Wu Kadi laughed out loud. "Fire Spirit, if you want, then go ahead." After hearing Wu Kadi's words, Fire Spirit was stunned. He was just saying some ruthless words, but he didn't think that Wu Kadi would take it seriously. Fire Spirit turned to look at Wu Ketian in the distance and then turned to look at Wu Kedi in front of him. He asked in confusion, Wu Kedi, why are you doing this? Why do you have to let me punch you before you're happy? Chapter 540. Hearing Fire Spirit's question, Wu Kedi calmly said, My big brother was injured by you, but you said that you would only compensate us if you hit him again. Wu Kedi paused for a bit before continuing, Since you put forward such a condition, then I will naturally satisfy you. Fire Spirit looked at Wu Kedi in shock. Just because of compensation, you'd rather let me hit your big brother? Aren't you afraid that I'll hit too hard and cripple your big brother? Wu Kedi shook his head, It's fine. As long as you're happy, then just do it. No matter how hard you hit him, I won't blame you. Fire Spirit looked at Wu Kedi in shock and suddenly shouted, Crazy, Wu Kedi, you're crazy. At this moment, Shadowless, who had been silent all this time, suddenly shouted, Me too, you also injured me. Shouldn't you compensate me too? Hearing Shadowless' words, Fire Spirit turned around in shock. After a while, he shouted again, You're crazy too, Shadowless, you're crazy too. Hearing Fire Spirit's words, Shadowless angrily said, Fire Spirit, you're the crazy one. Hurry up and compensate me. Seeing this, Wu Kedi naturally didn't want to be outdone. He also stepped forward and shouted, Fire Spirit, you injured my big brother. We need to settle this debt. Shadowless loudly said, Me too, Fire Spirit. You injured me first, so of course you need to solve my problem first. Wu Kedi also loudly said, We came first, so of course we need to solve our problem first. Hearing the chaotic arguments of the crowd, Water Spirit suddenly roared. All of you, get out of here. Water Spirit's words were said with all her strength. Everyone was caught off guard and was shocked. The scene suddenly became silent. Seeing that everyone had quieted down, Water Spirit coldly said, I've already made myself very clear. Each of your 3 families will get 2 pieces of level 20 equipment. If any of you object, then this agreement will immediately be voided. Do you understand? Hearing Water Spirit's words, Wu Kedi stepped forward and loudly said, But you injured Silver Knife and gave him a piece of level 25 equipment as compensation. My big brother was also injured by you. Don't tell me you don't care? This is too unfair. Water Spirit turned to look at Wu Kedi and coldly said, Wu Kedi, did you not hear what I just said? Speaking up to here, Water Spirit's tone paused for a bit before she continued, If you're not satisfied with our agreement just now, then I'll announce that our previous agreement doesn't count. Hearing Water Spirit's words, Wu Kedi was stunned and then angrily said, Water Spirit, what do you mean? We already have an agreement, why are you not keeping it? Shui Lingzi sneered and said, Wu Kedi, you're the one who started this, don't blame me. Wu Kedi angrily said, Water Spirit, then tell me, why can this brat Silver Knife get a piece of level 25 equipment while my big brother's injuries aren't light? Why can't he get any compensation? Hearing Wu Kedi's words, Water Spirit turned to look at Silver Knife and said with a smile, Silver Knife, this brat is ambitious, persistent, courageous, and patient. Such a good brat, how can I not help him? Wu Kedi was stunned when he heard this. He turned his head and looked at Yin Dao. He didn't realize that Yin Dao had so many good points. Water Spirit's tone paused for a bit before she continued, So, your big brother's situation is different from Silver Knife's. Your Wu family has so many resources, you don't need the little that I can give you. But Silver Knife is different. What he needs the most right now is help. With this brat's determination, as long as he gets a little help, he'll definitely soar into the sky. Speaking up to here, Water Spirit turned to look at Silver Knife and said with a smile, Silver Knife, I believe in you. You can definitely do it. Listening to Shui Lingzi's words, Yin Dao only felt a warm current flow into his heart, instantly gathering in his eyes, causing tears to flow down his cheeks once more. For so many years, no one cared about him as much as Water Spirit did, understood him, and understood him. Water Spirit, thank you. I won't forget you. Wu Kudi saw this touching scene and his heart was filled with anger. He turned to Shui Lingzi and shouted angrily. Water Spirit, I think you're looking down on my Wu family, right? Water Spirit shook her head. How would I dare to look down on your Wu family? The Wu family is famous in the South region and has a lot of talent. How could I look down on you? It should be your Wu family looking down on me. Speaking up to here, Water Spirit's tone paused and she sighed before continuing. If your Wu family looked down on me, you wouldn't put forward such a childish condition. Wu Kadi angrily said, Then you injured my big brother. How should we settle this account? Shui Lingzi sneered and said, Do we have to compensate for sparring? Then let me ask you, do we also have to compensate for sparring between fellow disciples? If that's the case, then you, Wu Kadi, are now a millionaire. Hearing Water Spirit's words, Wu Kadi gritted his teeth and angrily said, You're saying that my big brother and Fire Spirit were sparring? Water Spirit sneered, Isn't that the case? Hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Wu Kadi suddenly flew into a rage. He took a step forward and shouted, All right then, let's compare notes on martial art. Water Spirit turned to look at Wu Kadi and sneered, Wu Kadi, do you really want to spar with me? Wu Kadi gritted his teeth and asked, Water Spirit, do you not dare? Water Spirit sighed, If the two of us were to exchange pointers, then our previous conditions would no longer count. Hearing Water Spirit's words, Wu Kadi froze and began to hesitate. Seeing that Wu Kadi was speechless, Shadowless stepped forward and loudly said, Water Spirit, no matter what, Fire Spirit injured us. Even if you don't compensate us with level 25 equipment, you should at least compensate us with level 20 equipment. Water Spirit turned to look at Shadowless and sneered, Shadowless, do you really think so? Shadowless saw this and felt guilty, but he still forced a smile and said, Water Spirit, are you saying that you injured us fake? Water Spirit sighed, I want to solve this problem fairly. I'll give you the equipment and take away Kikiaman's people. This matter will be solved perfectly. Speaking up to here, Water Spirit's tone paused for a bit before continuing, but you guys keep making excuses and keep raising new conditions to make things difficult for me. Shadowless, I'll tell you now that I can't fulfill your conditions. Chapter 541. Water Spirit continued, If you want to continue the agreement, then do as I say. Otherwise, our agreement is null and void. After hearing Water Spirit's words, Wu Kadi suddenly sneered, Water Spirit, are you threatening us? Water Spirit shook her head, No, I'm just telling the truth. After listening to Water Spirit's answer, Wu Kadi took a deep breath and slowly said, How about this, my conditions aren't that high. You injured my big brother, so compensate me with a level 15 equipment. This shouldn't be too hard, right? As soon as Wu Kadi finished speaking, Shadowless hurriedly added, Water Spirit, Wu Kadi is right. I don't want your level 20 equipment. As long as you give me a piece of level 15 equipment, we'll call it even. Hearing the three's discussion, Li Shan couldn't hold back anymore. The LV-25 equipment was just about to fall into his hands, but Wu Kadi and Shadowless came out to cause trouble. Li Mingshan's heart was burning with anxiety. Li Shan knew that if the three of them couldn't solve this problem, then he definitely wouldn't be able to get his level 25 equipment. If the three of them failed, then all the agreements would be nullified, and his level 25 equipment would float away from his eyes. Thinking up to here, Li Mingshan hurriedly stepped forward in front of the three and loudly said, Water Spirit, I think it's better this way. Since they said that level 15 equipment is enough, I think it's better for you to pay 2 level 15 equipment and quickly resolve this matter. Speaking up to here, Li Shan paused for a moment before continuing, Water Spirit, don't forget, your Tiangongmen are still waiting for you at home. They want you to bring back Kikyaman's people as soon as possible. Hearing this, Water Spirit turned to look at Li Shan Shan and said with a smile, I want to give it to them, but I don't have that much equipment. Speaking up to here, Water Spirit paused for a moment before continuing, Li Mingshan, think about it, I've already paid you 3 parties 6 pieces of level 20 equipment. Adding on the level 25 equipment from Silver Knife, just how much equipment have I paid for? If it was you, would you have that much equipment to give them? After hearing Shui Lingzi's words, Li Shan's expression suddenly stiffened. This time, Water Spirit had indeed paid too much. 6 pieces of level 20 equipment were already out of everyone's expectations. Adding on the even higher level 25 equipment, this was simply unimaginable. To be honest, Li Shan Shan was already very satisfied with this matter. Even if he didn't get the 2 level 20 equipment, he was already very satisfied with the level 25 equipment. Therefore, he wanted to resolve this matter as soon as possible so that his dreams would not come to naught. Thinking of this, Li Mingshan turned to Shadowless and said with a smile, Brother Shadowless, Water Spirit wasn't lying this time. It is indeed difficult for him to take out so many pieces of equipment at once. I think you should just forget about those 2 pieces of equipment. Hearing Li Shan Shan's words, Shadowless flew into a rage. Li Shan Shan, what did you say? Are you saying that only the Godly Blade sect can obtain level 25 equipment? We don't have the qualifications? Seeing that Shadowless was angry, Li Shan Shan hurriedly said with a smile, Shadowless, that's not what I meant. I just wanted to say that Water Spirit really couldn't take out that many pieces of equipment. I hope you can understand his difficulties. Shadowless sneered. Li Shan Shan, as soon as you got the level 25 equipment, you immediately turned against us. Don't you think you're being a bit too inconsiderate? Li Mingshan hurriedly waved his hands and said, Brother Shadowless, what are you talking about? Why would I do something like that? Everything I've done is for the sake of our agreement. Brother Shadowless, once this matter is over, each of us will be able to get 2 pieces of level 20 equipment. Isn't that great? Shadowless shook his head and sighed. Li Shan Shan, don't try to flatter me. If I had a piece of level 25 equipment, I would also be very satisfied. Hearing Shadowless's words, Li Shan Shan's face suddenly changed. After a moment, he slowly said, Brother Shadowless, the level 25 equipment has nothing to do with us. You heard what Water Spirit said. He only gave Silver Blade a piece of level 25 equipment because he helped him. It has nothing to do with us. Shadowless turned his head to look at Li Shan Shan and sneered. Is that so? This time, without waiting for Li Shan Shan to answer, Wu Kadi spoke first. Brother Shadowless, you're right. If I had a piece of level 25 equipment, I wouldn't fight for it either. Speaking up to here, Wu Kadi paused for a moment before continuing. Li Shan Shan, how about this? How about you give me the level 25 equipment and I'll give you the level 15 equipment that Water Spirit gave me. Then this matter will be settled. What do you think? This level 25 equipment was Li Shan Shan's reverse scale. Anyone who dared to fight for it with him would be his enemy. After hearing Wu Kadi's words, Li Shan Shan reached out and grabbed the hilt of his sword. He coldly asked, Wu Kadi, what if I don't agree? Seeing this, Wu Kadi suddenly laughed. Li Shan Shan, do you want to fight with me? Li Shan Shan sneered. Wu Kadi, even if I fight, what can you do? Hearing this, Wu Kadi's eyes suddenly turned cold. Li Shan Shan, do you think I'm afraid of you? Li Mingshan looked at Wu Kadi and sighed. Wu Kadi, none of us can make a decision on Silver Knife's equipment. At this point, Li Mingshan paused for a moment. He suddenly had an idea and continued, Wu Kadi, Silver Knife is standing right there. If you have a way, you can talk to him yourself. As long as he agrees to give you the level 25 equipment, I have no objections. Hearing Li Shan Shan's words, Wu Kadi's eyes suddenly lit up. He hurriedly asked, Li Shan Shan, is what you said true? As long as Silver Blade agrees, you won't object? Li Shan Shan nodded and smiled. Wu Kadi, don't worry. What kind of person am I, Li Shan Shan? As long as I say it, I will definitely keep it. Hearing Li Shan Shan's answer, Wu Kadi nodded and laughed. Okay, I hope you won't go back on your words. After saying this, Wu Kadi walked towards Silver Blade. Looking at Wu Kadi's back, Li Shan Shan sneered in his heart. Silver Blade had already gone crazy. He only had one thought in his mind, and that was that level 25 equipment. Li Shan Shan didn't believe that there was anyone who could exchange that level 25 equipment from Silver Blade. Wu Kadi wasn't stupid. He also knew that it would be very difficult to exchange that level 25 equipment from Silver Blade. But for that level 25 equipment, even if there was only a glimmer of hope, Wu Kadi had to try. Chapter 542. Wu Kadi wasn't someone who liked to be long-winded. He quickly walked in front of Yin Dao and said directly, Yin Dao, I want to use a level 15 equipment to exchange for your level 25 equipment. Are you willing? After Wu Kadi asked this, he waited for Yin Dao to negotiate with him. This was because he believed that no one would agree to his condition. However, in this world, everything had to be negotiated before it could be settled. Hearing Wu Kadi's words, Yin Dao coldly said, Get out of my way. After Silver Knife said this, Wu Kadi was stunned. He looked at Silver Knife in front of him in disbelief. He was speechless for a while. Li Shan was also stunned. He never thought that Yin Dao would say something like this. Even Li Shan himself wouldn't dare to tell Yin Dao to get out of Wu Kadi's face. After being stunned for a while, Li Shan immediately reacted and rushed toward Yin Dao. At this time, Wu Kadi suddenly roared and swung his fist toward Yin Dao's head. Brat, you're courting death. Wu Kadi angrily attacked. The power behind his punch was shocking. When he swung his fist, there was a whistling sound. Seeing Wu Kadi's fierce punch, Yin Dao didn't even blink. It was as if Wu Kadi's punch wasn't aimed at him, but at someone else. Wu Kadi was proud of himself. Just as he was about to hit Yin Dao's head, Li Shan's fist also arrived. It directly hit Wu Kadi's arm, and Wu Kadi's fist was deflected. Wu Kadi's fist brushed past Yin Dao's ear. The fierce wind from the fist made Yin Dao's hair flutter. Wu Kadi's fist didn't hit Yin Dao, but his heart was still full of anger. He once again kicked toward Yin Dao's waist. Li Shan Shan, who was on the side, sensed that something was wrong. Taking advantage of Wu Kadi's unguarded state, he immediately reached out and pushed Wu Kadi's shoulder. Wu Kadi staggered to the side and kicked Silver Knife in the air. Wu Kadi just stabilized his body. He turned his head and fiercely stared at Li Shan. He angrily said, Li Shan, what is the meaning of this? Hearing this, Li Mingshan immediately pulled Wu Kadi to the side and said in a low voice, Wu Kadi, what's the meaning of this? Didn't we agree that you were only going to change your equipment? Why did you start fighting? Wu Kadi coldly looked at Li Shan Shan and angrily said, Li Shan Shan, didn't you hear him just now? This brat actually told me to get lost. Li Mingshan shook his head and said in a low voice, Wu Kadi, Yin Dao has already gone crazy. Don't you know that? Why are you still arguing with a lunatic? Hearing Li Shan Shan's words, Wu Kadi clenched his teeth, unable to reply. Everyone had seen Yin Dao's behavior just now. Yin Dao had already gone crazy. If he were to take a lunatic seriously, then wouldn't he be a lunatic as well? Li Shan Shan saw that Wu Kadi didn't answer, so he slowly said, Wu Kadi, I just told you to exchange equipment with Yin Dao, but you actually wanted to harm him. No matter what, Yin Dao is still a disciple of our godly saber sect. If he made a mistake, we will naturally punish him according to the sect rules. So, Wu Kadi, don't go near him again. Hearing Li Shan Shan's words, Wu Kadi clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. He turned his head and looked at Yin Dao. Only then did he remember his purpose just now. Yin Dao had level 25 equipment. Could it be that he would give up such a good opportunity just because he was angry? Thinking of this, Wu Kedi closed his eyes and quickly entered a meditative state. After a while, he felt that the anger in his heart had mostly dissipated. Only then did he slowly open his eyes and turn his head to look at Li Mingshan beside him, and said in a deep voice, Li Shan, I want to try again. Li Shan looked at Wu Kedi and asked, Wu Kedi, do you really want to try again? Wu Kedi didn't answer Li Shan's question. He only silently nodded his head, which was his answer. Seeing that Wu Kedi was determined to go, Li Shan sighed and solemnly said, Wu Kedi, you can go, but I have to remind you that you can't act like you did just now and act recklessly. Otherwise, I won't be polite to you. Wu Kedi didn't pay attention to Li Shan's words. He only took a deep breath and walked towards Yin Dao again. Wu Kedi arrived in front of Yin Dao. Looking at Yin Dao's disdainful eyes, anger rose in his heart once again. After being in the South region for so many years, Wu Kedi had never seen someone look at him with such disdain. If such a look appeared in the eyes of a peerless expert, Wu Kedi would have accepted it. After all, his skills were inferior. Even if he didn't admit it, he couldn't beat the opponent. However, the person who looked at him with such a look was actually a nameless disciple of the Godly Sword sect. This made Wu Kedi somewhat angry. Wu Kedi could guarantee that as long as he used one hand, he could beat Yin Dao to the ground. Such an opponent actually dared to look down on him. This was absolutely unforgivable. However, although Wu Kedi was furious, he still understood that if he wanted to exchange for level 25 equipment, he would have to lower his head to this nameless disciple. Wu Kedi took a deep breath and slowly said, Yin Dao, I'm really sorry for just now. I was impulsive. But don't worry, I won't do it again. When everyone heard this, they looked at Wu Kedi in disbelief. A dignified expert of a generation had actually apologized to Yin Dao. This was truly unexpected. Wu Kedi looked at Yin Dao with confidence. He believed that with his sincere apology, Yin Dao would definitely treat him well. After hearing Wu Kedi's words, Yin Dao only smiled coldly. Wu Kedi, I know that you don't dare to hit me. You only dare to scare me. If you really dare to hit me, Although Yin Dao didn't finish his words, the contempt in his words was clearly heard by everyone. Of course, the person who heard it the most was Wu Kedi. He was the closest. Not only did he hear Yin Dao's words, but he also saw Yin Dao's expression. The contempt in Yin Dao's eyes deeply pierced Wu Kedi's heart. Wu Kedi's entire body was trembling. His hands were already subconsciously clenched into fists, ready to attack at any time. Li Mingshan saw that the situation wasn't good. Just as he was about to rush over to save Wu Kedi, he suddenly heard Yin Dao's words again. Wu Kedi, don't scare me. I don't want to talk to you. Just get lost. Although this was the second time Yin Dao had asked Wu Kedi to get lost, and although Wu Kedi was already mentally prepared, he still couldn't accept it when Yin Dao said something that hurt his self-esteem in front of so many people. Wu Kedi slowly raised his fist and fiercely looked at Yin Dao. Yin Dao, aren't you afraid that I'll really hit you? Yin Dao shook his head and contemptuously said, Wu Kedi, you don't dare? Hearing such provocative words, Wu Kedi couldn't bear it anymore. He roared again and punched at Yin Dao. Chapter 543. Wu Kedi punched at Silver Knife again. Li Mingshan didn't have enough experience, so he quickly used the same trick and punched Wu Kedi's arm. Wu Kedi's arm was deflected, but this time Li Mingshan was too slow. Even though Wu Kedi's fist was deflected, it still hit Silver Knife's shoulder. Wu Kedi's fist was so powerful that even though it only grazed Silver Knife's shoulder, it still sent Silver Knife flying away with a scream. Li Mingshan was furious when he saw this. He hurriedly blocked Wu Kedi's fist and ran towards Silver Knife. Li Mingshan came to Silver Knife's side and asked in a low voice, "Silver Knife, how are you?" Cough, cough, Silver Knife wanted to say something, but he couldn't because of the violent coughing. He even spat out a few mouthfuls of blood, and his face was frighteningly pale. Wu Kedi's punch didn't hit his vital parts, but it only made his arm hurt so much that he couldn't move anymore. However, even though he had only hit his shoulder, it had once again aggravated the injuries on his body, causing his injuries to worsen. Looking at Silver Knife, who kept coughing, Li Mingshan turned to Wu Kedi and said angrily, "Wu Kedi, what did you promise me? Why didn't you keep your word and hit Silver Knife again?" After Wu Kedi punched Silver Knife, he started to regret it. Hearing Li Mingshan's question, he answered in a low voice, "I'm so sorry, I couldn't help it." At this moment, Silver Knife was also coughing. After hearing Wu Kedi's answer, Silver Knife said in a low voice while coughing, "Mr. Protector, don't be afraid. Even if you didn't stop him, he wouldn't dare to do anything to me." Cough, cough. Hearing Silver Knife's words, Li Mingshan was angry and shouted, "Silver Knife, shut up." Silver Knife nodded, "Mr. Protector, I know you're doing this for my own good. You really don't have to be afraid. Wu Kedi wouldn't dare to do anything to me." Hearing Silver Knife's words, everyone couldn't help but gasp. Just now when Wu Kedi had punched out, everyone had broken out in cold sweat for Yin Dao. Everyone had seen clearly that Wu Kedi's punch was not a feint. He really wanted to flatten Yin Dao's head. But Silver Knife didn't see such an obvious thing. Shui Lingzi secretly rejoiced that she changed her strategy. If she was the one who attacked, she wouldn't know how angry she would be. Water Spirit secretly hoped that Yin Dao would once again speak rudely to Wu Kedi. Only then would Wu Kedi strike again to deal with Silver Blade, who had provoked him. Lingzi didn't believe that Silver Knife's luck would always be able to protect him. Water Spirit was sure that Li Mingshan would also be careless at times, and as long as Li Mingshan was careless, Wu Kedi would definitely be able to kill Yin Dao. At that time, the levels a level 25 equipments. Wu Ku knew that he was being impulsive again. He clenched his teeth and quickly walked to Silver Knife. "Knife, Silvers, S knifes have shouted, he s's, he's. Wu Kedi, I'm telling you, you're dreaming." Hearing this, Wu Kedi's brows furrowed again. His eyes spat out flames of anger. "Silver Knife, what are you saying? I'm talking to you nicely, why are you always mocking me?" Silver Knife coldly snorted, "Because you're dreaming." Hearing Silver Knife's repeated provocations, Li Mingshan felt uncomfortable. He turned his head to look at Silver Knife and whispered, Silver Knife wants to exchange with you. Yin Dao, Wu Kedi wants to exchange equipment with you. If you're willing, you should agree. If you're not, then just say what you want. Why are you being so aggressive?" After hearing Li Shanshan's words, Wu Kedi nodded and said in a low voice, "Yin Dao, Li Shanshan is right. Let's talk about it. If you agree, we can trade. Or if you have any conditions, I can negotiate with you. In short, we should both be satisfied." Hearing Wu Kedi's words, Silver Knife coldly said, "Okay, then I'll tell you, I don't agree." At this point, Silver Saber paused, and tears suddenly flowed out of his eyes. He choked as he continued, "For this equipment, I was heavily injured by the fire spirit, and now, my arm was broken by you. Wu Kedi, I ask, why did I pay so much? Tell me, is it just to exchange the level 25 equipment that I traded my life for your level 15 equipment? Wu Kedi, tell me, if you were me, would you exchange?" After hearing Silver Knife's words, Wu Kedi subconsciously looked at him. He couldn't help but be shocked. Silver Knife's injuries were too serious. His left shoulder was injured by him, and it might even be fractured. His other arm was broken by Li Mingshan, and his body was punched by fire spirits several times. With such serious injuries, if it was anyone else, they would have been seriously injured. However, Silver Knife still had the energy to chat with them. Thinking about how much Silver Knife had paid, Wu Kadi secretly sighed in his heart. Although he knew that Silver Knife wouldn't agree to his conditions, for that level 25 equipment, Wu Kadi still wanted to try. Thinking up to here, Wu Kadi took a deep breath and slowly asked, Silver Knife, if you have any conditions, I can agree to them. Speaking up to here, Wu Kadi's heart suddenly moved. He hurriedly said, Silver Knife, if you are willing, you can also join my family. I can also accept you as my disciple. What do you think? Hearing Wu Kadi's words, Silver Knife shook his head. Wu Kadi, I'm sorry, but I already have a plan. I'm going to exchange this level 25 equipment for a high-level elixir to increase my strength. Hearing Silver Knife's words, Wu Kadi suddenly laughed. Silver Knife, if you want to exchange elixirs, why do you have to go back to the Godly Knife sect to exchange? I can tell you the truth. Our Wu family also has a lot of elixirs. If you are willing, we can talk about it in detail. Hearing Wu Kadi's words, Silver Knife finally turned his head and suspiciously asked, Wu Kadi, could it be that your Wu family also has a lot of elixirs? Hearing Silver Knife's question, Wu Kadi proudly said, although our Wu family didn't establish a large sect, our main job is to search for elixirs and then sell them to the various sections. Speaking up to here, Wu Kadi paused for a moment before continuing, so, Silver Knife, if you want to exchange that level 25 equipment for elixirs, why don't you come directly to our Wu family? That way, you won't have to go through the middleman to exchange for better elixirs. Hearing Wu Kadi's words, Silver Knife didn't react, but Li Mingshan was already furious. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.